resolve. Alan stares at the scene, a bead of sweat on his temple, his mind racing as he processes his name, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. Anastasia hurries to the prince's side, asking if he is all right. Now on his feet, he turns to Amy with a grateful smile, telling her that her power is amazingly wonderful. She blushes, demurely stating she was only doing it. Alan recognizes this interaction as a clear hint from wondering if Amy has successfully navigated it. Nearby, Anastasia expresses her relief that the prince's burns were the only significant in the aftermath. The bond between the crown prince and their closeness becoming more apparent to all. However, this new family agency comes at a cost. Amy becomes the target of other students whispering cruel rumors about her common origins and supposed partners. These whispers are led by a particular group of girls.
Paimon's having a bunch of fun filling up this aquarium! Since Sandrone doesn't mind, we should definitely catch some more fishies and make this place extra beautiful!
Her voice sharp with authority. She admonishes
Hey,
them for
you
stepping
two.
into the classroom,
Come over here.
an act of lowly individuals, and reminding
Huh?
them to uphold
Is everything alright?
the girls, startled and intimidated, quickly apologize despite
Here,
intervention.
this
The
is
social
for
damage
you.
has been done. Amy feels the chill of isolation, sensing that
What
everyone
is
has
it?
done to avoid. Anastasia observes the situation with a sad expression, wondering aloud if she should try to tell
It's an underwater mobility device I've been working on.
Misinterprets her concern, loudly declaring that he will take care of everything. From a distance, a young man named Alan
Huh?
realization.
Wow!
He reflects that the events
So kind of you, Sandrone!
But Amy's personality seems
It's just a simple mechanical device. I saw the way you were catching fish and... how should I put this? It seemed somewhat unsophisticated. To be perfectly frank, I found it quite difficult to watch.
He concludes she likely has no choice but to
Was it really that bad?
His thoughts turn to the school's social structure. The female students are divided.
It was inefficient, unskilled, and completely and utterly inelegant. No need to apologize. Everyone has their own ways of doing things. But seeing as you plan to keep adding to the aquarium, it might be best if you use this device.
Like their rivals, they do not appear to think well of Amy either. He thinks about the crown prince himself, who, despite being Anastasia's fiancé, is only interested in Amy. He barely speaks to Anastasia. And this blatant
The waters of
disregard is
Fontaine
not
are home to more than just
Others see this
harmless
as an
ornamental
opportunity to flirt
fish.
and remove
There are
Anastasia.
plenty of
Should her
predators
reputation
who could do
so
you
far,
some real
the
harm.
egotistical prince
This
has no
device
regard
will
for
not only
himself.
help you
The
fish,
ability below
it'll
him can
also
only
help you
resort to
flee.
flattery and schemes to drag each other.
All right.
It all means one thing.
Oh, and if
The
you're
royal
going
city
for a
is not
swim,
Having
go
finished the
now.
shower, he begins to
And
dress
don't
his
forget
way
to tell me what you
towards
think of the
shifting from the
device.
kingdom to his own
I can
circle.
always make more
He walks through the halls,
adjustments if you have
reflecting his
any
strategy.
feedback.
He speaks to no one, whether commoner or noble, unless absolutely necessary. In doing so, he has steadily established a reserved, detached position for himself. He gazes out of classroom as an air of uncertainty looms. The exams are finished, and the summer holiday begins tomorrow. He sits in the classroom as the teacher concludes the final lesson, reminding all students to review the handout detailing their independent study assignments for the upcoming week. The basis for these assignments are the final exam results. A posted list reveals a surprising outcome. Alan is placed first with a perfect score, followed by Anastasia, Amy, Marcus, and Claude. At this school, students are typically grouped by performance, but esteemed nobles are exempt from being placed in other classes. This results in Anastasia. She calls out to him. Leonardo mutters to listen. Alan, still seated, dismissing her, Anastasia tells him to stay in his as expected of a special student. Alan is taken aback by the unexpected praise, rendered momentarily speechless. Her inquiry continues as she reveals she has heard he is a qualified individual. Alan confirms he is serious. She then asks if he has ever explored it. He replies that he has been seemingly satisfied. Anastasia declares that she will send a messenger to him later, leaving him utterly confused. The questions answered, she turns to leave, offering a clear apology for having her. As she departs, he watches her with expression. Though he tells her it was no bother, his mind races with suspicion. He questions why she would seek him out and what a messenger could do. A dreadful thing possible. Could he be found out in school too ends in a long his vacation, however, takes an unexpected turn. He finds himself standing before the academy's Anastasia, Prince, Amy, and their entourages, and introduces himself as their guide for the exploration of the environments. Internally, he He despairs at how things have turned out this way. Once everyone is ready, he tells them explaining that his request was effective to assist the Crown Prince and the others. He warns them all to be careful, as the road ahead is inhabited by creatures which can easily cause injury. As the group of nobles travels, Claude scoffs, declaring he has no intention of being beaten by mere ornament. Proudly stating that he has been trained to become a future knight commander. Nearby, Oscar dismisses the creatures with a smug look, promising to finish any they encounter. Marcus adds with a sneer that he will turn them into a barbecue for Oscar. The prince overhears this and retorts that if Marcus were grilling, there would be nothing left but charcoal. The comment sparks a chaotic argument with Claude and Leonardo suddenly each claiming she is theirs. Amy tries to interject, explaining that Alan was simply expressing concern. Her words are lost in the noise. Alan can only think that he wants to go. As the bickering intensifies, Anastasia watches with growing irritation. The prince, noticing her expression, calls for calm. He urges them to hurry, stating that if they are late, he turns a sharp gaze on Marcus, who's fallen behind. He snaps at the slowpoke to move quickly, and Marcus meekly complies. The group arrives at a marvelous down stone wall. Alan confirms it's the right place and directs them towards the underground entrance of a flight of stone steps, warning them to be careful of the slippery moss. As they begin their ascent, the prince offers his hand to Amy, telling her to be careful. Anastasia observes the gesture from behind, her expression unreadable but tinged with annoyance. Inside, Alan reflects that other adventurers were supposed to be their guides, but the plan changed when Anastasia discovered his background. He resolves to follow the script to avoid trouble. The group proceeds down a tight corridor, its walls faintly glowing. The students marvel at the sight, realizing it's a bioluminescent moss called a Karigo. Amy calls it beautiful, and the prince agrees, adding that she is even more so. Alan braces himself, certain that Anastasia will be annoyed by their fun. He glances over, but to his surprise, Anastasia is not annoyed at all. She gazes at the glowing walls, and raised to shield her eyes, and quietly murmurs that it is indeed beautiful. Alan is momentarily stunned by her genuine reaction. Her reverie is broken as she turns to him, her expression now serious. She asks if there are any monsters in the area. Alan confirms there are none, explaining that while it was a goblin, the adventurers guild considered. Anastasia listens intently, processing the information. Her line of questioning is cut short by the prince, who lost her. They confronted Alan, demanding to know if he had brought them to these filthy, monsterless ruins for nothing, calling him an incompetent commoner. Alan could only offer a terse apology, his own expression hardening slightly. The other nobles quickly joined the remarking on the boring, musty room. As they grumbled, Amy wandered towards a far wall. Alan noticed her, calling out that seemingly surprised by his attention. He then explained to the group that this chamber was once a treasure room for the goblins that lived here. However, after the Adventurers Guild exterminated the nest, they took everything. While the prince remained unimpressed, Anastasia found the detail fascinating, noting her surprise that goblins had established a base so close to the capital. This is the prince insisting. She announced that she had found the scroll of a prophet. Alan's eyes widened in recognition. That was the exact place. Her discovery caught Anastasia's sharp gaze. She approached and asked Amy to join. Crouching by the door, Amy quickly dismissed the question, claiming it was enough. This entire exchange struck Alan as deeply strange. In the game, finding the scroll was a random event. Yet Amy had gone straight to the spot, as if she already knew. The thought solidified in his mind. Did he also know about the Otone game? Just like other nobles began bickering again. Anastasia approached Alan, noting his knowledge would be useful for her report. She then added that something else felt strange. According to how events should have unfolded, she was supposed to have shown much more hostility and jealousy towards Amy. Her words confirmed Alan's fears. This world was slowly starting to change. With that unsettling realization, they decided to head back. Anastasia approaches Alan, directly asking to spend time with him the next day. A bit taken aback, Alan agrees. Satisfied, she confirms their meeting for the following morning in front of the school gate before departing. This summons came immediately after they had finished their exploration of some nearby. As instructed, he arrived at the school's break. Broad-eyed, surprised by not in the station. The state she emerged, apologizing. She acknowledged him. Climb up the side of the driveway. She stopped him, directing him to get inside the cabin instead. Once they were both settled inside, the carriage set off through the town streets. Anastasia thanked him for coming, and also for his guidance during their exploration the previous day. Inside the carriage, she turned her attention to some documents, and brought up a report that some experts. Now asked sweating slightly. The question if she was truly willing to go so far for what was supposed to be a simple high school assignment. She elaborated on the immense pressure, stating that the report would be officially submitted by the Crown Prince and Prince Claude of Western. It would become a permanent record of the capabilities of the country's future leaders. The United States would be heavily scrutinized. For that reason, she could not allow for any half-measures. She concluded that for the future of their country and to maintain friendly relations between the two kingdoms, they had to carefully listen to the experts and distill their knowledge into an error-free report, regardless of the understanding the gravity of the situation, Alan not as their carriage rattled through the city streets. He found himself genuinely wanting to support Anastasia's sincere wishes. Their research began. They sat before a cheerful, elderly man, an expert researcher with various other scholars, and spent long hours in libraries, poring over stacks of creative reports and immersed themselves in a research. Alan noted in some opponents that none of the scholars offered any discussions. Presenting the three documents to the Crown Prince, Anastasia announced their success, only for him to glance at it and declare it too long. He then demanded they explain it to him in 3 minutes. He leaned back on the sofa with his arms crossed, stating plainly that he was busy and needed her to summarize it for him. Anastasia stood before him, speechless, as two maids watched from aside. Alan, observing the exchange, thought to himself with a wry smile. He wouldn't have minded helping the prince, if only he had actually bothered to read the report first. He lets out a quiet sigh. Beside him, Anastasia's expression is one of stern disapproval of the prince's attitude. Alan, however, simply reminds himself that Karl-Heinz is just a classmate, not his boss. He recounts to her that despite his annoyance, he went ahead and simplified their extensive report for the prince. After receiving the summary, Karl-Heinz offered a dismissive good word for the small way. Anastasia looks her expression somber, explaining that this is just how his mind is, asking him to bear with it. Her resigned tone is palpable. Alan observes her, thinking to himself that it was as if she had completely given up. He quietly speaks her name. He recognizes the look on her face. It was one of someone resigned to their fate, a mere pawn in a political marriage. Despite the prince's apathy, the full report received glowing reviews from the teachers who graded it. Word of its excellence, and soon other prominent students like Leonardo and Claude were being celebrated as rising stars. Unsurprisingly, since Karl-Heinz was credited as the primary author. Alan, meanwhile, was labeled by his peers a freeloader who was lucky to have him. He sits apart from the crowd, feigning indifference. His nonchalance masks a firm resolve. He thinks to himself that he only has to endure this until winter. When the time comes, he plans to defeat the prince and his cronies in a duel and finally get himself expelled. As Alan contemplates his future, time marches on. Anastasia stands alone by a window, her arms crossed and her expression troubled. As the summer passes, the summer gave way to autumn. The leaves began to fall around the Royal High School. With the new season became the next major school event, the cultural festival. Students gathered around a notice board detailing the rules, buzzing with ideas for their projects. Cafe with friends. Amidst the chatter, Alan considered his own plans. He turned to Anastasia, his expression. He explained that while he had an idea of what to do, his primary goal was to prevent a specific. Since not participating was forbidden, he had no choice but to get involved. She asked what he had decided on, offering to help the prince's group again if he was still undecided. Alan, however, politely declined, explaining that he had already submitted his application. Anastasia paused, processing his words before quietly acknowledging his decision. Curious, she inquired about his project. He revealed he was planning a food stall. With a faint smile, Anastasia wished him luck, and he offered a quiet word of thanks until she walked away. He watched her go, a troubled look on his face. He reminded himself that he needed to keep a low profile and avoid getting involved with either Anastasia's or Amy's groups to stay clear of the main story events. Despite his resolution, he found himself observing Amy's group from a distance. She was surrounded by Oscar, Marcus, Leonardo, and Claude, all diligently planning their project. They discussed the optimal placement for their display to manage the flow of customers. Focus intense. Alan watched them, trying to remain unnoticed. He sighed internally, realizing his fears were coming true. Just as he'd expected, the boys were completely captivated by Amy. Claude mentioned he was getting thirsty. Amy turned her attention away from the ladies, looking toward the isolated princess, asking her. The princess's expression, her gaze cold and resentful. She was approached by one of her companions, who asked with concern if she had not done it. Before she could answer, Prince Karl-Heinz calls out to Amy to take their tea. Amy agrees to join her short. As the others prepare to leave, her companion asks if Anastasia will be having tea as well. When Anastasia confirms, the girl expresses confusion, pointing out that Anastasia is present but not actually assisting with the festival. Continues to tease her, noting the icy mask Anastasia wears and commenting that it isn't very cute. In response, Anastasia offers only a self-satisfied smile. The companion speculates that the prince must not like that expression and suggests that the people deserve a cute princess. Anastasia dismisses this, stating that such things are not important in her relationship with His Highness. Her friend presses on, demanding a smile from the future queen, and noting that Anastasia's current behavior is different from what she saw in the game. Anastasia coldly reminds the girl, Baroness von Breezes, to mind her tone, asserting that despite being classmates, status must still be observed. Just then, Amy returns, declaring Anastasia's behavior around men to be a cause for concern and unseemly for her station. Enraged by the interruption, Anastasia shouts for the outsider to stop. The commotion draws the prince back and angrily demands to immediately demands an explanation from Anastasia. Before the Baroness can defend her, the prince silences her, stating he will not hear a word against Amy, telling Anastasia not to channel her frustrations onto others. He then turns to Amy, dismisses Anastasia for the day, and orders her to clean up. Left alone in the silent room, she stands defeated, whispering her complaints, as you wish. As the sound of the prince's departing footsteps fades, she begins to quietly gather steps. She confronts Amy in a quiet hallway, her expression sharp with disdain. Carrying a box of papers, Anastasia coldly asks how it feels to have her fiancé looking down at the silent girl and dismissing her as pathetic. As Anastasia leans in, a sudden, loud sneeze echoes from Amy. The sound startles Alan, who is watching from a distance, and he recognizes both Anastasia and Amy in the midst of their confrontation. The unexpected interruption causes Anastasia to pull back. Amy, no longer demure, looks up with a stern gaze. She tells Anastasia that while her opinion may not matter, she must understand that the prince is the future king. Amy declares that Anastasia does not comprehend the duties of a noble and is therefore unworthy of His Highness. Amy's sharp gaze then drifts past Anastasia, her expression hardening as she quietly asks, "What's with that guy?" Her thoughts turn inward, dismissing Alan as a mere background. She bites her thumb, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face as she realizes the key event. The slap that was meant to trigger the kingdom's collapse has been prevented. The deviation from the expected path is irritating. His vantage point, Alan is bewildered. He questions why Amy would stop the slap, as the event shut down. Amy smirks to herself as a new realization. This scenario wasn't even part of the extra hardness. Something she's never encountered despite the countless hours she invested in the game. Her thoughts confirm everything for her. Amy was able to play the game just like her. He understands her goal. She's aiming for the reverse harem. A path he knows leads to the capital's destruction. She is manipulating events to suit her desires. But this world is now his home, where his family and friends live. A new resolve hardens his expression. He will not just stand aside. He's going to stop her. A young girl declares herself as a hero. She recalls her former life. One of the she was struck by a carriage. The impact of her caused her to return. She then understood that the world was a stage for an O-tone game she enjoyed. Magical fantasy. And she was its protagonist, surrounded by the game's handsome male leads. Her thoughts drifted back to her previous life, where she had been a high school student who died in an accident. She had hated her miserable world and was obsessed with the game, as the handsome male did seem to appreciate her in a way the people at her school never did. She came to believe that God must have taken pity on her, preparing a second life for her as the heroine. This belief was solidified when it was revealed that she was the illegitimate child of Baron Breeze, and both she and her mother were taken in by his noble family. With this new reality, she smugly anticipated a princess like her by a handsome man luxuriously for a devoted fan such as herself. She was confident that achieving the reverse hero ending would be a simple task. Her ambitions carried her all the way to high school, where she intended to begin her conquest. However, she was soon approached by Anastasia, who had placed first in the entrance exams. Anastasia noted that the second and third place students were commoners and, addressing Amy as Margaret, ordered her to investigate them. The two students in question were Alan, who placed second, and Amy herself, who placed third. Alan was a boy from a poor district, raised by a single mother, who had nonetheless become the youngest in history to graduate from the commoner school with perfect marks. Amy was known as the illegitimate child of Baron Braves, possessing a healing blessing. As they walked through the school's corridors, Anastasia elaborated that they should pay more attention to Alan. When Amy asked why, Anastasia explained that it was suspicious for a commoner to achieve such high scores so unexpectedly, and that his motivations and financial situation didn't make sense. Amy asked what she intended to do. Anastasia speculated that Alan might be receiving support from her ducal family's opposing political faction, or perhaps some other questionable organization from abroad. For the time being, she decided they would simply observe it. Their conversation concluded as they entered a grand hall for the entrance ceremony. An announcement called for freshmen to take their seats. Anastasia and Amy found a spot in the last row on the left, ready for the school year to officially begin. An incident where the prince received minor burns, and Amy used her low-level healing blessing to treat it. Though the magic was slow, the act had clearly deepened His Highness's trust in Amy. Anastasia watched, her resolve hardened. This situation could not be allowed to continue. Anastasia understood Amy's strategy all too well. She was clever, effortlessly charming the main male students, Marcus, Leonardo, the Prince Claude, and Oscar, who all swore their devotion to her. Amy was actively pursuing a reverse harem route, and in her game, the meddling, pathetic losers like Anastasia and her friends was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. She recalled the grim fate that awaited her in the original tale. Despite being born with every advantage, beauty, intelligence, and the path to all lay before her, it was all destined to end in ruin. A broken engagement, a brutal violation, and finally death at the hands of the very woman who had taken her. From the shadows, Amy's cruel amusement echoed in her mind, a chilling reminder of the stakes. Her focus, however, was on the present. Her plans were pursued, but the final exams brought an unexpected development. The results were posted. Alan first, herself second, and Amy third. A single mistake had cost her the top spot. She realized that while she had been preoccupied with His Highness and that woman, neglecting her duties as a student, Alan had been quietly working, achieving a perfect score. She decided to change her thinking. The social chasm between royalty and a baron's child was vast. It was best to let His Highness enjoy his dalliances for the time being. With a new resolve, she walked through the school's corridors. For now, she would focus on her studies, beginning with the independent research project for the summer vacation. She remembered His Highness expressing a desire to explore some ruins. The fact that Alan was an adventurer presented a perfect opportunity. At the ruins, the prince discovered the appraisal scroll was missing and urged Amy to retreat with him. She readily agreed. Watching them, Anastasia felt quiet satisfaction. Inviting Alan had been correct. She was aware that in this version of the world, the high difficulty the scroll was unavailable, a trivial detail for an experienced player. She considered Alan an excellent guide. His wealth of
Hello there,
experience,
traveler in
likely born
Paimon.
from early hardship, making him utterly convincing.
Miss Guton mentioned you've been running an aquarium.
She expressed
Naturally, I
gratitude,
accepted
noting
her
how he
invitation to come
consistently
serve as a
surprised
marine
her as she
consultant.
and requested his assistance again the following day. From a distance, Amy watched their interaction with a smirk, noting
Great!
how friendly they appeared.
With head
Her
nurse
gaze
Siegeween
shifted to
around,
Alan, who was
we
likely
won't have to
looking
worry
over
about the
her
little
shoulder.
fishies getting
That
sick.
mob character, she thought,
was certainly useful. She then decided, with a touch of self-proclaimed
Since you asked me to
that
look
after she had
after the
successfully
animals at the
picked out
Chevalmoran
she would
Film
keep that
Fantasyland,
confidence of personal
I've
self.
picked up a few
Anastasia
tricks of the
observed
trade.
Amy's cheerful demeanor. She could tell what the girl was thinking.
It
and
turns
only
out
confirmed
looking
her
after
reasoning.
animals
Just
isn't
as she
all that
thought,
different from
Alan
caring for
agreed. She found
patients.
herself feeling ecstatic
Well,
while exchanging
the
feelings.
well-behaved ones, at
First,
least.
Alan lacked basic knowledge, but he absorbed information
But
so
that's the
quickly he
thing.
could now engage
Not
in
all
discussion.
fish are
So the
well-behaved.
smile didn't go unnoticed.
So on top of
Alan
looking
asked if
after the
something
ones
was
you
wrong,
already
but
have,
Anastasia
I
quickly
have a
brushed it
few
off,
ideas
assuring
for
him there was
inpatient
later.
therapy
She watched
that
from a
I'd like to
distance,
discuss.
observing that, as usual, Alan
The
was
word from
She
Officer
mused that for a
Seaseth is
commoner
that
in an
certain
academy
wild
filled with
fish have been
nobles,
getting
such an
unusually
environment must be
aggressive
safe.
lately.
She wondered if there was a way to help,
Apparently,
considering
they're
inviting him
attacking
to
other
the upcoming
creatures,
cultural
as
festival.
well as
She felt
divers and
confident
even
that
small
Alan would handle
boats.
himself well if he participated. Before she could act, Alan approached, informing her that he had already
I was
submitted his
wondering
application for
if we
food
could
stall.
invite them to the
Surprised,
aquarium for
Anastasia
some
acknowledged his
rest and
decision,
relaxation.
thinking of pity, but
At
accepted.
the very least,
She told him
it'll
she was
keep
looking
them from
forward to it. Their
causing any more
conversation was cut
trouble.
short by Amy's sharp interruption. She called Anastasia's behavior ridiculous and accused her of creating misunderstandings by getting close to boys. Amy declared
Once
that
they're
outsiders
here,
should stay out,
I can look for a way to
recognizing
cure
this
their
as a
sudden
pivotal
bad
moment from the
temper.
reverse harem route, where the villainess is meant to slap her. Provoked, Anastasia glared at her. Just then, the prince arrived,
That way,
demanding to know the
we can help
cause
the
of it.
fish and the
Amy
waters return to
immediately turned
normal.
him, feigning
And you
innocence
can add some
and claiming
unique
she just
guest
wanted to get
performers to your
The prince,
aquarium.
taking her side, told Anastasia that
What a
if she was led
wonderful
away,
idea!
Amy's innocent facade dropped into a confidence.
All right.
She decided that while it
I'll
might
give
be
you all the
troublesome
intel I
later,
have
it
on
was
where
better
to
push
find
things
those
a little
aggressive
further.
fish.
She turned back
The
to
rest
dejected
is up
Anastasia,
to you.
her voice dripping with malice as she asked how it felt to have her fiancé stolen away. Her final, silent thought, pure contempt, serves you right. Anastasia could only stare back, her expression a mixture of shock and pain. Fury mounting, Anastasia glared at Amy, who only smirked in return. Amy goaded her, noting how angry she was and daring her to retaliate, vowing to repay any action.
I like to drink on occasion.
Alan
Any and every occasion.
Anastasia
Good one.
Amy, however, seethed with frustration and confusion, inwardly cursing the boy for interfering just as she was about to succeed. She turned her attention back to Amy, who responded with a dismissive sound. Anastasia began to lecture her, stating that while it was likely pointless, Amy needed to understand that the prince is the future king. She admonished Amy for failing to grasp the roles expected of royalty and nobility, declaring her behavior unfit for someone associated with his highness. Her lecture was cut short by a sudden, loud sneeze from Amy. The unexpected sound left Anastasia momentarily speechless. Later, alone in her room, Anastasia reflected on the encounter. She understood that if she had acted on her anger at that moment, the situation could have become severe. Thinking of Alan's timely arrival, she quietly wondered to herself if she had been safe. On a wet runway, a jet-powered glider comes to a stop. A pilot in a winter flight suited adjusting his course, letting out a breath and remarking on the freezing air at high altitudes this time of year. Elsewhere, Alan stands over a large netted monitor, noting that the cold temperature is perfect for transport. With freshness being the key, he decides it's time to open up. The scene shifts to a bustling school festival. In front of a grand building, a waitress in a frilly uniform cheerfully welcomes patrons to her cafe as students mill around the corner. Inside, having finished their own exhibit preparations, she asks her friend and invites them to take a look around the festival. She leads them through the crowded grounds, following the organizing committee. Interrupted by the loud welcome. Anastasia stops short, stunned to see Alan calls delicious work meat from behind a counter display. Clearly finding the sight of the roasted meat incredibly appetizing. Anastasia immediately started at the food stall for pork meat, recalling that it's a delicacy in Amy's home region of Alma. She observes the other students, noting that while the food looks delicious, many are repulsed by the idea of eating monster meat and are keeping their distance. With a knowing smile, Anastasia turns to Amy and asks her to come with her. As the noble students murmur among themselves that the spectacle is too shocking, they agree that keeping the ordinary and dismantle alive is why no one is approaching the stall. Unaware of the discussions, Alan enjoys a piece of the meat himself. He admits that he mainly set up the stall because he wanted to eat it, and decides he'll just take any leftovers to the guild. His thoughts are interrupted as Anastasia and Amy arrive at his counter. Alan looks up in surprise, stammering a welcome to the princess. Unfazed, Anastasia confidently asks for a skewer. He listened as Princess Anastasia introduced her companion as Margaret von Alten, a friend of hers. Amy, whose hometown was famous for pork meat, looked at her, then requested a skewer, admitting she was a bit particular about something. The juices flowed from the crispy on the outside and soft and thin, seasoned only with salt. Amy looked on, questioning how he could sell such high-ranked, perfectly cooked meat for a mere 100 cents. He explained that he acquired it through a secret route, an adventurer's privilege, careful not to reveal he'd hunted himself that morning. As he spoke, Anastasia loudly proclaimed the meat's quality to the growing crowd. Its firm texture and lack of odor proved its freshness. She declared it was delicious and something no one should miss. Her words had an immediate effect. Students surged forward, eagerly placing orders for 2, even 3 skewers at a time. Alan, wide-eyed, quickly confirmed their requests, but the stall man bustled. Anastasia suggested to Amy that they should head back, as Alan would be busy for a while. Amy, still savoring the last bite, returned to the party. He called out, thanking them for his seat. Anastasia simply replied that they would just have a telling them to come back later to watch him dismantle the room. The suggestion was met with a mix of enthusiasm from Amy and firm rejection from Anastasia. Business continued to boom. As he worked, Alan made a mental note to check on Anastasia. Once he had some food, thanks to the large crowd Anastasia had gathered, Alan sold out. Another figure decided we should have some fun while he was there. Resolving to start he headed towards it, stepped inside, finding the exhibition. Yet there wasn't any section to show a copy. He read the description with disbelief. Juicy meat that children never and that he found the entire presentation to be incredibly shallow. He surmised that this must be a mistake. He wondered if this was true. His attention was drawn to the this was a roof display. Anastasia is writing a shot in the sun. I was eagerly taken back to see Anastasia calmly explained that she was now experiencing on the whole situation. She had told the prince to stop and of cake and fruits made him hungry. Nearby, Anastasia overhears and flushes, stammering that she understands. Realizing his comment was strange, he quickly adds that her work was truly great. Anastasia seems to accept the praise, though she remains flustered. Amy then approaches, reminding him that the school festival is almost over and that they need to clean up before heading to the auditorium. He agrees. From a nearby doorway, the prince observes Anastasia's reaction. He finds it curious, thinking to himself that he never imagined she was interested in sweets. Anastasia, meanwhile, regrets her choice of subject, wishing she had brought a different piece. Later, in the auditorium, an official takes the stage and announces the winner of the year's cultural festival, which was held under the theme of downtown culture. Living the king's resources is declared. The group, led by His Highness Crown Prince Carlines. The announcer explains their exhibition focused on the poor, highlighting their living conditions and the kingdom's future role. As the crowd cheers, Alan watches the prince and his companions wave from the stage. Taking the podium, the prince thanks everyone for their work. He graciously gives credit to Amy, revealing that the theme for their project was her idea. Amy adds that their goal was to highlight the current situation and consider what could be done. As she speaks, Alan reflects on the stated purpose of royalty, to guide the weaker people, and contrasts it with the memory of a meal from the city, thrown away uneaten. He internally scoffs at the prince's speech, deeming it shallow and obnoxious. The realization that this future king fills him with dread for the country's future. His thoughts then turn to the future. He knows that with the coming of winter, an event known as the Anastasia condemnation is approaching. Before that, however, he realizes there is another critical event he must prevent. He sat alone on a park bench, contemplating the grim future he knew. The protagonist, Amy, would be relentlessly harassed by the villainous Anastasia and her followers, a conflict that would culminate in Amy being pushed down a flight of stairs. He noted, however, that the current situation was unfolding differently. The relationship between Prince Karlheinz and Anastasia seemed to have ended far too quickly compared to the original story. Still, he knew this was the pivotal event he had to prevent. He recalled that in the game, the harassment from Anastasia and her minions was a mandatory event, a certainty on Karlheinz's path. Yet, in this reality, they had done nothing of the sort. His expression hardened with resolve. If the harassment event never happened, then there would be no condemned and exiled. Elsewhere, Anastasia herself lost in thought, a worried frown on her face. She too felt that things were diverging from the scenario and wondered if the event would still trigger regardless. Alan considered a hopeful possibility. If the event could be avoided and the engagement between the Crown Prince and Anastasia was simply called off, then perhaps she could find her own happiness. His quiet contemplation was shattered by the sound of nearby students gossiping. They spoke of Anastasia snatching and burning Amy's pen out of jealousy, and that Prince Karlheinz had summoned her. A cold dread washed over Alan. It had already started. Fate, he realized, did not change so easily. The scene he dreaded was already unfolding. Prince Karlheinz, flanked by his friends, furiously demanded to know what Anastasia was thinking, accusing her of harassing the kind-hearted Amy by burning her pen. Anastasia calmly denied the charge for both herself and her friends. His companions sided with her. Anastasia looked around, realizing she was completely surrounded and outnumbered. She challenged them to provide a weary look in her eyes. She remembered how far Amy would go. The confrontation escalated when Leonardo von Juice grabbed her arm, insisting they weren't finished. Anastasia questioned how this counsel. Enraged, Leonardo shouted at the Alan interrupted. Alvin announced that it was almost time for class to start, and that everyone should hurry back. Leonardo ignored the interruption from his mom. Anastasia looked at Alan, ignoring the hostility. Alan formally addressed Anastasia, asking her to please hurry, before turning and excusing himself. He stood with Anastasia, who acknowledged the event. She mused that she knew it all along, questioning if Amy had triggered anything herself. With a smirk, she declared that if the condemnation was inevitable, she was actually looking forward to it, as things were proceeding just like this game. As they spoke, the formal party began, and an announcer's voice echoed through the hall, congratulating the students on their promotion and graduation before introducing the freshman student of the year, Crown Prince Karlheinz. Taking the stage, the prince beamed at the crowd, expressing his gratitude for the award. He insisted, however, that he also wanted to honor the friends who supported him along the way, starting with Claude, whom he beckoned to join him. Place in the crowd. Alan watched the proceedings with a troubled expression. A young woman approached him, remarking that she was always amazed by his eye for detail. She asked if he was enjoying it, introduced herself as Isabella von Ludenberg. After they discussed the information. Alan, however, was distracted. On stage, the prince stood with his companions, declaring that his mission was only possible with their help and asking for the crowd's continued support. His tone shifted. He announced he had one more thing to say, his voice ringing out as he made a final, pointed summons. Anastasia Kleinel von Ramslet, come forward. In the audience, both Anastasia and Alan tensed, realizing the moment had arrived. Before a crowd of students, Prince Karlheinz points an accusatory finger at Anastasia Kleinel von Ramslet. With a furious expression, he makes a stunning declaration. As of this moment, he is breaking off their engagement. She remains perfectly composed, questioning if His Highness is serious. She asks if he truly desires a woman who knows nothing of nobility or the country's affairs. The prince, enraged by her calm demeanor, dismisses her, retorting that she knows nothing and demanding she show more anger and upset. He then turns and pulls Amy into a protective embrace. He declares that Amy, a kind woman with healing powers, is the one who deserves to be his fiancée, not a rotten woman like Anastasia. Amy swoons in his arms, thinking how wonderful he is and silently urging him to condemn her rival. She coolly asks if he will take responsibility for the consequences. Nearby, Alan observes that Anastasia's response is unexpectedly calm, not at all like he anticipated. He overhears another student remark that this is why the bull-headed Ramslets always get into trouble, warning Anastasia to be careful what she says. The student concludes she must have given up on the prince long ago. He sneers, proclaiming that this is why the Ramslets will forever be nothing more than country bumpkins who can only grow old. Both Anastasia and Amy specific, rehearsed sounding insults. She finally shows a flicker of emotion, stating that while she doesn't care what he says about her, she cannot overlook an insult to the Ramslet family. Amy joins him, claiming it's the truth, and that Anastasia's countryside or Anastasia turns her gaze to Amy, questioning her involvement as well. Seeing no point in continuing, Anastasia turns to leave, stating it's useless to take this further. The prince shouts for her to stop, demanding to know where she is going without permission. She advises him to handle the situation himself with the pride of a noble, instead of crying to his parents. Her words make him pause, and he asks what her gloves are for. She replies that they are not meant to. The prince misinterprets her meaning, taking it as a sign of weakness. He declares that the daughter of the Ramslet family can't even fight for her family's pride and honor, mocking her father's supposed lack of talent for raising children. She looks at him coldly, asking if he wants her to challenge Amy to a duel. The prince scoffs at her question, telling her to think for herself and expressing frustration that he, the crown prince, should have to explain everything to her. His condescending tone elicits a sharp retort from Anastasia. She tells him he should have done that earlier, and with determined eyes, she begins to pull off her right glove. Amy lets out a small cry of alarm as she realizes what is about to happen. As she made her move, a triumphant smirk spread across Amy's face. She was certain that victory was guaranteed and the villainess's downfall was confirmed. Her gaze, however, was not on Amy, but on the glove that had slipped from her hand and fallen to the floor. Lifting her eyes, Anastasia confronted Amy directly, questioning how far she intended to take the provocation and asking if insulting her was truly satisfying. From the sidelines, Alan observed, realizing Amy had orchestrated the entire confrontation, knowing she had been challenged to a duel. Before Amy could respond, Prince Karlheinz stepped forward, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. He assured Amy not to worry, declaring he would fight her on her behalf. Alan looked on, perplexed by the prince's decision to fight for the one who had been challenged. His friends, Claude, Marcus, and Leonardo, quickly each volunteered. They turned their collective gaze to Anastasia, mockingly asking what she would do now, and if she even had a representative who could fight them. As the prince laughed at Anastasia's apparent lack of strength, his voice cut through the crowd. Alan stepped forward and announced that he would do it. He would act. She whirled around in shock, rushing down the stairs towards him. Grabbing his shoulders, Anastasia demanded to know what he was talking about, insisting there was no need for someone like him to get involved in a duel against her. Her frantic words did not faze him. Alan met her panic gaze with a calm, steady expression and simply instructed her. Anastasia said, "Say I accept it." She could only stare back bewildered before she could protest. He turned back towards the prince and loudly announced that Anastasia had accepted the duel. Anastasia was horrified, trying to deny it, her thoughts racing that she couldn't let a talent like Alan go to waste. His declaration silenced the whole. Prince Karlheinz's confident expression vanished, replaced by a hard, focused glare directed squarely at the young boy who had just challenged him. He recognized the boy, asking if he was a commoner he knew. The prince reminded Alan that they were in the same class, and that he had even shown him some ruins before. Before Alan could respond, Anastasia interjected, stating that she had already made her decision. She demanded that the prince take back his insults to the Ramslet family and apologize. Unmoved, the prince simply asked what she and Amy were demanding from each other. As the question was directed at Amy, she stammered, unsure how to answer. The prince's companions cut her off, warning her to stay away from all of them. They then turned their attention back to Alan, informing him that since there were 5 of them, he would either have to find 4 more representatives or fight 5 consecutive one-on-one matches. Alan sighed, calling the proposition troublesome, and casually asked if they could all attack him at once. Claude scoffed at the commoner's audacity. Alan insisted he wasn't joking and provocatively asked if His Highness was scared of him. Claude's amusement vanished, replaced by a snarl as he asked if Alan wanted to be torn to pieces. Anastasia tried to intervene, telling Alan that his bravery was appreciated, but that he was far outmatched in magic, archery, and swordsmanship. She questioned if he was afraid they couldn't win together. Leonardo Alan a meat-headed dog, while Marcus suffered as a koozie to a cone. Oscar mused that his own popularity was due to his family and guns. Amidst the chaos, Anastasia pleaded with Alan, asking why he was deliberately making things more difficult. He simply told her not to worry, promising he wouldn't run. Watching the scene unfold, Amy had a startling realization. This wasn't right. They were fighting for the villainous. This time, Anastasia, too, watched Alan prepare for this. She had her own suspicions about what's going on. A worthless commoner was the truth struck her with revulsion. Alan was in love with the villainous. Ignoring the others, Alan issued his final challenge directly to the prince. He asked Karlheinz what he would do: accept the 1 versus 5 rule or run away. Cornered and furious, the prince gritted his teeth and accepted. "Okay," he snarled, "but don't regret this later." As the terms of the duel settled, Alan spoke up, addressing Anastasia directly. He had one more condition. In this fight, neither side would be allowed to kill the other. The princess stared back, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. He offered a slight, almost apologetic smile, admitting he had forgotten to mention it and thanking her. In the background, the prince's companions discussed the new rule. Marcus conceded it was a better condition, as it would look bad for a group to kill a single. The prince, however, scoffed in frustration, declaring it fine before raising his voice to call for a witness to the duel. In response to his call, an elderly nobleman with long, light hair and a fur-collared vest stepped forward from the crowd. He placed a hand on his chest and formally offered to serve as the witness for the duel, addressing the prince with deference. Alan watched him approach, his expression unreadable. The witness decided. The prince announced that the duel would commence in 30 minutes, giving them time to prepare. Alan's eyes narrowed, and he accused them of trying to cheat by appointing their own witness. But the prince simply confirmed the arrangement. He pointed a finger at Alan, warning him not to regret his decision before declaring they would wait at the training grounds. Alan calmly accepted. As he turned, he was immediately surrounded by his concerned friends, including Anastasia, who urged him that it wasn't too late to withdraw. Alan simply smiled, murmuring that it was good, which only served to fluster the princess. Her composure breaking, Anastasia admitted she was happy he had good friends, but pleaded with him to withdraw, insisting no one would blame him. She expressed her fear that a talent like him would destroy, worrying that the prince would simply dismiss any foul play as an accident. Touched by her genuine concern, Alan quietly spoke her name. He then turned to the worried group and asked if they had heard the rumor of the youngest C-rank adventurer in the capital. When they acknowledged the story, he grinned and pointed to himself, revealing that he was that very adventurer. He continued, adding the titles of Goblin and Orc Slayer to his name, and claimed to have even defeated a Blizzard Phoenix single-handedly, leaving Anastasia.
Yeah.
Only stare, speechless. Begins to disappear. Anastasia, her thoughts, companions called out his name, one of them demanding to know why he had come so poorly equipped. The prince paid them no mind, instead turning to Anastasia and vowing to win the duel for her. Nearby, Leonardo clicked his tongue in annoyance, remarking on the duel between Anastasia and the commoner Alan, who resented them both. The official witness cut in impatiently, declaring that was enough and ordering them to begin. A sharp command. Leonardo lunged forward without hesitation. Closer burst of light and force. Alan vanished from his spot, and Leonardo was violently thrown, his body slamming into the stone ground. The onlookers could only stare in stunned silence. A sudden explosion of smoke erupts across the dueling arena, completely obscuring the combatants. From the sidelines, Anastasia, the prince, and Marcus stare in disbelief. Anastasia wonders aloud what the strange smoke screen is, her thoughts immediately turning to Alan. Spectators cough, blinded by the thick cloud. Anastasia anxiously questions what is happening on the field. The smoke slowly begins to dissipate. The still forms of defeated students are revealed lying on the ground. It appears the match is already over. When the last of the haze clears, Alan is surrounded by the fallen bodies of his 5 opponents. The prince cries out in horror, naming the defeated members: Prince Claude, Oscar, and his dear Leonardo. Anastasia can only stare, speechless. He sees that even crowned Prince Karl-Heinz and Marcus are the downfighters. The prince clutches his chest, stammering in disbelief. The referee, seeing Alan holding a weapon to his defeated side, screams for him to stop. The official declares Leonardo, Claude, and Oscar unable to he pleads for help, but Alan coldly asks if the man will take responsibility if he doesn't concede the match, threatening to stab the student. The crowd murmurs in shock at how quickly he defeated 3 people. Anastasia vetches Alan intently. His strategy unfolds in his mind. From the start, he planned to use a smokescreen and activate his stealth skill. Blinded and confused, Claude and Leonardo could only shout into the smoke, wondering where the commoner bastard had gone. He then drew the pistol and suppressor employing a newly developed non-lethal technique. He knew the projectile would kill, but its force would be enough to break bones, causing excruciating pain. After taking down Claude, he activated stealth once more and deployed the started with Marcus the Magician. Alan had correctly predicted that Marcus would make easy in unexpected situations. Instead of using magic to a non-poisonous mist, he was overwhelmed. Alan was glad he didn't have to deal with magic immediately. With Marcus down, Leonardo was next. Leonardo swung his sword wildly in the smoke, demanding his cowardly opponent show himself. Alan knew he couldn't risk a stray bullet hitting a student in the crowd, so he couldn't approach carelessly. Instead, he used a small gust of wind to briefly clear the smoke, creating an opening to strike. The master archer, Oscar, was also helpless, unable to shoot a target he couldn't see. The prince, still breathing, shouts at him, demanding to know who was responsible. He complains that he can't even see his own hand, the lungs freeze, and accuses Alan of his own. He demands an answer. Did Alan kill him as the dust settled? The referees The accusation struck him. Marcus could only think that he had done it all to protect Amy. Alan then raised his voice for all to hear, questioning if Marcus had blamed Anastasia unilaterally, without any proof, simply because Amy had been hurt. The distant crowd, Anastasia, strained to hear, confused by the turn in the conversation, declared that the only thing Marcus should do now was apologize to Anastasia. Calling him a short-sighted choice for a future leader, Alan told him to reflect on his actions. Then, with blinding speed, he delivered a sharp palm strike directly to Marcus's face. The blow sent Marcus collapsing to the ground, his glasses shattering on the stone. The referee announced his defeat. A wave of disbelief washed over the crowd as they realized the commoner had now beaten 4 of the nobles. Anastasia stood close to each other. Only one opponent was left, the crown prince, Karlheinz. He erupted in fury, calling Alan a coward for using his magic tools instead of fighting fair and square. Claude, having recovered slightly, joined in, declaring the duel invalid. Alan calmly countered, questioning if it was not far more cowardly to publicly insult Anastasia and force her into such a duel. He reminded the prince that he, too, had blamed Anastasia solely because Amy was hurt, and that no rule forbade it. He insisted that Anastasia had been harassing Amy. Alan's voice boomed across the arena, proclaiming that it was all baseless accusations. He stated plainly that Anastasia had done nothing wrong, and, unlike them, he had no reason to lie. As he spoke, Amy watched with wide, confused eyes, the certainty of her own story beginning to waver, his composure finally shattering. The prince roared for Alan to shut up. He raved about the pressures of royalty, how no one ever cared for his personal desires. In his mind, he saw the truth. Amy was the only one who saw him, not the crown. His favorite things, his private thoughts, she saw it all. His voice cracked with desperation as he screamed that Amy was his, and only with her could he ever be happy. Across the arena, a terrible understanding dawned on Anastasia's face. Still reeling from the prince's outburst, she could only watch as Alan continued to press him. He questioned how the prince could not see Anastasia's devotion as his fiancée. Alan explained that she had understood her duty to the country and the people. Yet the prince had ignored her, focusing solely on Amy and pushing Anastasia to the point of breaking their engagement and entering a duel. The prince, unable to bear it, roared for him to shut up. He continued, his voice filled with anguish, lamenting that being born into royalty prevented him from living freely with the women he chose. He accused commoners of having an easy life, protected by the royals. Alan simply asked if that was truly the case. In response, the prince challenged him, suggesting that if a commoner's life was so desirable, Alan should judge it. The challenge was met with a cold fury. Alan described the reality of a commoner's life since childhood. Endless days of filthy, tough manual labor for a mere 1,000 cents a day. He spoke of meager meals, vegetables, a piece of dried meat, and hard bread that had to be soaked in thin syrup, and a constant, gnawing hunger followed sleep. The surge of anger, he warned the prince to quit being so desperate. He pressed on, his voice ringing out over the silent crowd. He asked if the prince had ever truly considered the country or its people. If he had, Alan asserted, then chose Lady Anastasia. Hearing this, Anastasia lowered her head, her expression filled with sorrow. As she processed his words, Alan's voice was filled. He stated that it was already too late for him as well. This is the end, he declared. Alarmed, Anastasia looked up, calling out his name, and the warning came just in time. Behind Alan, the prince, his face a mask of tear-streaked fury, was gathering a sphere of dark, chaotic matter. Anastasia recognized it instantly as the same power he had lost control of before, but this time it was visibly stronger. "This is for you," the prince screamed, ready to unleash his Prince Karlheinz unleashes a massive, swirling sphere. With a look of desperate resolve, he declares that he will for Amy, vowing to watching from the sidelines. Anastasia, she realizes she must suppress the prince's magic, but fears her own spells won't be enough. As the dark energy hurtles forward, she screams Alan's name in terror. In response to her cry, Alan remains as the chaotic sphere of magic closes. He simply raises a hand. A casual flick of his wrist effortlessly deflects the entire attack, sending the prince tumbling backward from the directed force. The deflected blast of dark energy dissipates harmlessly as the prince is thrown across the grounds, landing hard on his back. His opponent defeated, Alan lowers his hand, flexing his fingers slightly before letting out a quiet sigh. The witness stares in stunned silence. On the ground, the prince lies unconscious checking his condition with a worried hand. A voice rings out across the room, announcing his prince Karlheinz. The duel is declared in the crowd. Isabella celebrated, cheering for Alan's incredible win, while Anastasia, her celebration ceases as Amy falls to her knees. She stares blank, the process what's happening. Her world crumbles, she questions what she made. Believing that she's supposed to be the Anastasia calls out. The dual witness steps forward, interrupting him. He states that the duel has been settled and formally asks Anastasia to provide the final confirmation. She agrees, accepting her responsibility for having raised the duel. Feeling she must clean up the mess, she turns and runs, she lies it out, calling his name as she throws the words. Thank you for everything. Echoing. The room is silent, empty, the bedding full of people. The school maid enters, and Anastasia immediately asks for the student who occupied this room. The maid explains that she was only asked to clean the room. The realization of Anastasia. Alan arrives home, surprisingly. He carries a large bundle of belongings. Internally, he won the duel against the Teyvats. Surely not. He explained everything to his mother. He sits down with her, recounts the event, explaining that he sided with the He concludes by stating that he will almost certainly be expelled from school. He apologizes, assuming she disappointed that he won't to his surprise, his mother simply closes her eyes and accepts her. She tells him she's proud that he's grown up and helped someone in his current situation. However, she cautions him that getting involved in princes and other countries could lead to consequences far more severe than exposure. She makes him a solid promise. If trouble comes, she will take his place. He must work. Alan immediately realizes, but she insists that his health and safety are all important. The conversation concludes with his mother urging him to go. He quietly agrees and heads to his sleeping area. Lying in bed, he stares at the ceiling, his mind racing. He questions the fairness of his world and worries about the future, wondering if he will have the strength to his resolve hardens. He wants to save his mother and the people of the city he has worked so hard for, but a flicker of doubt remains. A memory from his childhood services. His mother, holding a lantern, patiently encouraging him as he nervously climbed a steep ladder to the loft, telling him it was fine and he could make it. He lay in bed as his mother sat beside him, the distant castle visible through the window. She remarked how long it had been since she'd seen him like this, noting he was no longer a baby. With a gentle smile, she confessed that she'd always wondered about his brilliance, but now she understood it was because he was his father's son. He wondered aloud if that was why he had messed up and involved her. He admitted that he was never told why his father died before he was born. His mother explained that he was just like him. His father had also helped a girl who was in trouble. She assured Alan that his father would be proud of him. Alan quietly reflected on this, realizing his mother had never spoken so much about his father until now. Her expression hardened with resolve. She declared that she would fight anyone who tried to hurt him, be it the king or any noble. Moved, Alan apologized to his mother, but she gently placed a hand on his head, telling him she was proud of the great job he did. Then, to his surprise, she announced she was going to sleep there too and told him to move over. The next morning, after a good night's sleep, his head felt clear. As he washed his face, he reflected that he had been too negative the night before. His intervention had prevented Anastasia's condemnation, averted a potential civil war, and stopped an invasion from the estate. So far, everything was proceeding as he had planned. He concluded that his anxiety was simply due to exhaustion and nerves. Besides, it hadn't even been decided if he would be executed. As he stood up from the wash basin, his mother's voice called out for him. Knowing that he confirmed that it was good. She smiled, remarking how long it was since he was. Despite the peaceful moment, his expression grew serious as he thought to himself, wondering how long this tranquility would last. A sudden knock on the door interrupted their meal. Alan wondered who could be visiting so early. He considered that it might be someone from the royal palace, though it had only been a day. He stood up, telling his mother to check. He opened the door, but found the entrance empty. Confused, he looked out into the quiet morning, seeing no one. Suddenly, Monica burst into the room, tackling his mother in a powerful, breathless hug. Katerina cried out her name in surprise as Monica enthusiastically wished her a good morning. Releasing Katerina, Monica turned to Alan. She explained that some men from the guild were now waiting for her. She had stopped by on her way from the market, handing his mother a basket. As Alan processed the news, a nostalgic look crossed his face. He found his guild mates waiting for him outside. The bald, bearded adventurer asked what was wrong and why he had returned so suddenly, while Jared greeted him warmly, remarking that it had been a long time. They immediately began to tease him, with one adventurer jokingly accusing him of bringing the girl. Another corrected him, saying Alan wasn't like that. They pressed him, asking if he'd been kicked out of the dormitory and what he'd done to deserve it. As they departed, the bald man reminded him to visit the guild once in a while. Monica, standing nearby, asked if he'd explained the situation, but Alan simply insisted he hadn't done anything. He turned to his mother, who watched with a knowing expression. He confirmed her understanding, stating that he could not get involved in things. As he spoke, his attention was drawn to the street. where an ornate and beautiful carriage was stopped. His expression tightened with anxiety. He wondered aloud if they were from the palace, questioning why they would come at this time. The possibility seemed unbelievable to him. The carriage doors swung open, revealing Princess Anastasia. Alan stared in disbelief as an elderly butler stepped out beside her. The man bowed slightly, introducing himself as a butler from the Duke of Ramsden. A formal carriage, drawn by 2 horses, stands in the cobblestone. Alan looks on in disbelief, questioning why it doesn't pick him up. His mother cries out, insisting her son has done nothing. The elderly butler, however, calmly explains that his master, Gerhard, the head of the Duke of Ramsden family, wishes to leave the town. He swears in the Duke's name that Alan, whom he calls their young lady's benefactor, will not be harmed. The butler then asks Alan to please change his clothes before they depart, promising to wait. Seeing his mother's lingering concern, Alan turns to her with a reassuring smile, telling her that everything will be fine. Now dressed in a smart uniform, he rides in the carriage as it clatters to the city. He sits quietly, observing the streets from his window while the butler sits opposite. He gazes out at the opulent architecture, realizing it's his first time ever visiting the aristocratic district. Every mansion he sees is amazing. The carriage finally slows to a stop before an immense and stately manor, the official residence of the Duke of Ramsden. Inside a lavishly appointed waiting room, the butler asks him to wait for a moment. The maid promptly appears, offering a cup of tea, which Alan gratefully accepts. He takes a sip of the tea, his eyes scanning the elegant room. He reflects that the residence is exactly as one would expect from a prestigious aristocratic family. His cup down. He takes a deep breath to steady his nerves. He tells himself to calm down, focusing on his objective, determining how much cooperation he can secure from the Ramsden family. Just then, a hand turns the handle of the grand door. The doors swing open, revealing an imposing and regal attire. Alan looks up, startled, as the man greets him with a confident smile. "Good morning," the man said. Alan gestured for the young man to take a seat. Alan, looking somewhat tense, complied and formally introduced himself. The nobleman then introduced himself as Gerhard, the head of the Ramslet dukedom, apologizing for the sudden summons. Alan assured him it was no problem. The Duke then stated that it seemed Alan had taken care of his daughter the previous day. He continued, expressing his gratitude to Alan for fighting a duel against His Highness and Prince Claude on his daughter's behalf. The Duke then leaned forward, asking if he could pose a few questions. Alan, taken aback, thanked and urged the nobleman not to trouble himself. He quickly agreed to answer anything. He apologized, admitting that he had looked into Alan's background, revealing he knew Alan was the youngest Serengeti, the conqueror of the Goblin Labyrinth, and known as the Orc in comics. He went on, listing more of Alan's feats, defeating a blizzard phoenix, graduating early from commoner school, and saving up to enroll in the high school. With all this information laid out, the Duke questioned why someone with such a record would request to be his daughter's representative in a foolish duel. He then cut to the heart of the matter, bluntly asking if Alan wanted his daughter. Alan replied firmly, stating that he was prepared to be expelled from school. He explained that he admires Anastasia's dedication and hard work. He continued, acknowledging that he was fully aware of the difference in their social statuses, and trailed on. The Duke pressed him, asking why he would risk the high school he worked so hard to enter. Alan admitted that the Duke might not believe him, but his words were left unspoken as the Duke demanded to know his reason. He listened as Alan finally explained his motivation, declaring that he wants to protect his mother and the people who have taken care of him. The boy's answer seemed to confuse the Duke, who repeated the word back to him, questioning its meaning in this context. He took a sip from his cup, confirming that he had heard everything about the incident. He acknowledged that the duel was unfair, remarking that he had never heard of such a ridiculous affair. Alan countered that a duel is still a duel, but added that had Anastasia fought for herself, she would not have truly harmed His Highness. The Duke conceded the point, admitting that given his daughter's personality, her defeat was indeed evident from the start. He continued the thought, realizing that if she had lost, the opposing party would have demanded she be forbidden from approaching. This, the Duke concluded, would have led to Anastasia's expulsion from school for something she didn't do. Alan then laid out the far greater consequences. He explained that if a duke's daughter were to be unilaterally excluded by the prince, it would set a dangerous precedent for other noble families. This instability, he argued, would ignite a battle for succession between the crown prince and the second prince, plunging the kingdom into chaos and bloodshed. The Duke raised a hand, indicating he understood the point. Despite understanding the political theory, he pressed for the connection to Alan's stated goal. He leaned forward and asked how a royal power struggle could possibly affect ordinary people like the boy's mother and loved ones. His gaze was firm as he gave his true answer. He is worried about the fate of the entire Estonian kingdom. The boy's grand declaration silenced him. His expression hardened, his eyes narrowing as he stared intently at Alan, weighing the immense scale of his concern. He processed the boy's words, understanding that Alan had considered the situation to a profound degree. Alan humbly clarified that his conclusions were merely guesses based on what he had read in the newspapers. His decision made, the Duke placed a heavy hand on Alan's shoulder, declaring that he would take responsibility for the case and ensure the safety of Alan's mother. He announced that from this day forward, the Duke of Ramslet had his back, and that Alan could finally relax. Alan, in turn, offered his profound thanks. He then called for his butler, Seabass, instructing him to see Alan back comfortably. A bit overwhelmed, Alan thanked them once more. He formally excused himself before departing with the butler. After Alan's departure, Duke Ramslet was left alone, his expression serious and contemplative. He pondered the boy's future, reflecting on the fact that a commoner with divine protection had managed to defeat 5 nobles. He wondered what kind of man Alan would become. His thoughts drifted to what his daughter, Anna, had told him. He realized that from a simple commotion at school, Alan had been able to analyze and act upon the precarious state of their country, surrounded as it was by hostile nations. The memory of the previous night surfaced, when Anastasia's urgent cries for her father had echoed outside the estate, pleading to be heard. He had met her at the door, clad in his nightgown and attended by a maid. Surprised by her early return, he had asked what happened. She, with a look of great urgency, insisted she needed to tell him something important.
On me!
As the butler served refreshments, the Duke had listened. He now reflects on her words, questioning if she had truly said Alan would become stupid, or if the reality he just witnessed was the true extent of what she meant. He began by expressing his disbelief, stating that while her opponents in the duel were the school's strongest, including the prince, he couldn't accept that she had one on her. In response, she brought up a classmate named Alan, explaining that he was a scholarship student from humble background. She elaborated on his impressive resume. The youngest to-rank adventurer in history, a labyrinth explorer, a slayer of goblins and orcs, and one of the best students. She added that he was also a serious and likable magic user who could counter the prince's uncontrolled plans. After listening to him, her father bluntly asked if she had fallen in love before. Her face flushed red with embarrassment.
Traveler,
He simply
Paimon.
chuckled, amused by her
It's been
enthusiasm.
such a long
thinking
time.
It must be in the early stages. His amusement faded as he grew serious once more, stroking his chin thoughtfully.
Why are you
He
wearing
commented
your
that,
diving
in
helmet?
any case, maintaining her engagement with His Highness would now be difficult. She looked down, her expression troubled, and quietly acknowledged that things were going to be rough. As she considered the difficult road ahead, her father was already
Things
seeking
down
more
there
information.
have been a
Turning to
bit
his butler on the Seabass,
hectic
about the
lately.
scholarship student. The butler
There are
reported
so
that
many
Alan had
more
been raised by a
divers
single
right
mother
now,
on the royal capital.
all in a frenzy to
Anastasia,
salvage
standing
sunken
nearby,
cargo.
interjected that she had
All
already
I can
invested.
do is
She then
try
declared
my
with
best to
conviction
lend a
how
hand.
someone in their country
The
had not
sooner we
followed
finish cleaning
her
up,
father, his
the
back
sooner
filter,
these extra
considered that her
divers can
claims
go
were true.
back to their
The
day
boy was
jobs,
indeed
and the sooner the
outstanding.
seas can go back
He
to
turned
their
to face her,
usual
bringing
peace
the
and
special
quiet.
clothes. He assured her that he understood everything she
It must
had
be
told him.
really hard for you to
Noting
adapt to all the
layout,
commotion,
he
huh?
instructed her to go and rest. He listened as
Thanks
his
for
daughter,
your
her voice
concern,
strong and
Paimon.
worried, pleaded with her.
It's not all that
He brought
bad,
his
though.
thoughts back to the present.
I've actually
He stood
made a
alone,
few extra
contemplating the
finds.
tangled mess of his daughter's
Things
engagement
like
with the prince.
unclaimed
The situation
jewelry
far from
and
trivial. As Anastasia
antiques.
entered his study, accompanied
Father
by her
said that
companion,
if I
he
salvage
confirmed her
any
assessment.
pretty or
The boy,
valuable
Alan, was
things,
exactly as she had
I
expected. He
should
affirmed
bring
his
them
observation,
here.
but continued with a heavy
She
heart.
said you'd
She
be able
confessed
to
that she had
find a
been
use
provoked
for
by the
them.
duel, foolishly dragging Alan into the fight.
Arlecchino
The
sure is
situation had been so
thoughtful.
volatile.
If
she
you've got
admitted
any
that it
pretty-looking
could have
ornaments
escalated
that
into
nobody
a war
wants
for the
anymore,
entire country.
we
As her
could use them
companion
to
watched
decorate
with
the
a worried
aquarium.
expression, Anastasia
Or even
voiced
better,
her shame over the entire
why don't we
affair
go
involving
salvaging
her.
with you?
Seeing her distress, the
Are
older
you
woman stepped
sure?
forward, gently
I
cradling
wouldn't want to
Anastasia's
waste
head
your
off the
precious
couch while his daughter was
time.
being consoled.
Don't
The
you
Duke's
worry
resolve.
about that.
He announced his intention
You
to
already
go to the
said
royal
we can
palace.
keep
He then
any
turned to
ownerless
face
goodies you
Anastasia,
find.
whose face was streaked with tears. He declared
how
that as the
can we
head of the
let you
dukedom,
do all
he
the
would
work
personally
yourself?
ensure Alan's protection.
Taking the
Asking if
fruits of
this was the
someone
outcome
else's
she wanted.
labor while we sit
Through her
here
tears,
twiddling our
she
thumbs
managed to quiet
doesn't
her.
sit well
Decision
with
was made.
Paimon.
The matter was settled. Following these events, Alan found himself being escorted to a carriage by the Ramslet family butler. He asked
In
for
that
Anastasia,
case,
but the butler
I'll
politely
share
informed him that she
everything
was
the other
unavailable to
divers
see
have
anyone
told
that
me.
day. Understanding. Alan thanked him
Hopefully,
and moved
that'll
toward
help
the carriage.
narrow
The carriage
down your
carried him away.
search.
The boy's thoughts
If you
lingered
find
on the
anything that
princess. He was
takes
certain
your
Anastasia
fancy,
must hate him now,
feel
having
free to make
disappeared
good
without
use of
warning.
it.
He felt it couldn't be helped.
However,
Thought weighed heavily on him.
some
Reflected on his
things are
circumstances while
wanted
the
by
scene
their
passed by
owners.
outside the window.
So
He
if
was
you
glad to
find
have
one
changed
of
his
those,
fate and managed to
you'll
survive,
need to
but he knew
return
it
it.
wasn't enough. For now,
Understood.
however, it would have to do. A few days later, Alan was
please
high up on a
stay
ladder in
safe
what appeared to
and
be a
don't
barn
stray
when his
into
mother's voice
unfamiliar
called him.
waters.
She announced that someone
If
was
you
there
run
soon.
into
He sent to find
danger,
the Ramslet family
make
butler,
sure to
who
surface as
greeted him
quickly as
but
it's
Alan's
safe to do
eyes
so.
widened in shock at the person standing beside him. The butler presented a sealed letter, extending an invitation to Duke Gerhard for dinner the next day. Alan could only stare, stunned by the request and Anastasia's sudden appearance. Inside a grand estate, Alan stands uncomfortably in unfamiliar, formal attire. His mother, Katerina, looks on with worry, her hands clasped together as she asks if it is truly acceptable for them to be wearing such fine clothes. She expresses her deep appreciation for the consideration they've been shown. Alan attempts to soothe her worries, explaining that Sebastian had assured him it was fine if they didn't wear formal attire. He adds that her reaction is hardly surprising, considering how rarely commoners are invited to dine. He, at least, has a school uniform to fall back on. A large, powerfully built man with a beard greets him warmly, welcoming Alan. He gestures to Anastasia, who stands beside Alan with her eyes closed, then asks if the woman with him is his mother. Katerina introduces herself and thanks the man for the invitation. The man introduces himself as Gerhard Kleinel von Ramslet, the head of the Ramslet family. He tells Katerina that his daughter is greatly indebted to Alan and expresses his sincere gratitude for all the help he has provided. He then turns to introduce his wife, Elizabeth, and his son.
Oh,
Friedrich.
you've been bringing
The young
back
boy offers
so
a
many
polite nice
fish
to meet.
lately.
Elizabeth addresses
The
him with a
aquarium
calm
is starting to look like a
stating that she
real
invited her
ocean
daughter's benefactor
habitat.
and his mother and wishes to avoid formalities.
Practically
Bowing
pro fishy
respectfully,
fetchers
Alan
already.
introduces himself.
You appear
adding that
to
it is an
take
honor
great
to meet
pride
him.
in
His
your
meeting
work.
is interrupted when Elizabeth
You
calls out
betcha.
to Anastasia, announcing Alan's arrival.
Behind a sense of
Anastasia,
accomplishment?
now in a formal gown,
There's something
turns
else.
with an expression of
Something
intense
more
irritation. Alan is startled to see her as she strides purposefully towards him, ignoring the confused murmurs of the other guests. She reaches him and abruptly pulls him aside. As he stammers in
that's it.
confusion, she whirls
That's
on
how
him,
Paimon's
demanding to know
feeling
what that was about.
underneath.
She asked if that was
Why
any way
is
to say
that?
goodbye. Utterly bewildered, Alan can only apologize,
Paimon's not sure.
wondering if she is angry. Her expression
feels like
softens
something's
slightly. She apologizes for
missing.
suddenly disappearing, but admits she is happy to see him again. She then thanks him for fighting the duel for her. Alan, still processing the sudden shift,
That's
can
it.
only manage a
We're
confused sound of
missing
acknowledgement as
visitors to come and
Elizabeth
admire our
watches them.
amazing
Flustered by the
handiwork.
Duchess's observation that she and
You're
Alan are
saying
close, she
you
tries
want to
deny.
open the
Alan,
aquarium
however,
to
simply
visitors?
expresses his relief,
Would that
admitting
not
he
be
thought
okay?
she hated him and was glad to see her again. His sincerity leaves Anastasia speechless. The moment is broken by the arrival of Duke Gerhard,
If that's
who
the case,
apologizes for the
just
delay.
leave
The butler
everything to
clears his
us.
throat,
We'll
signaling
take
a
care of
shift in the scene.
advertising
Duchess
and all the
Elizabeth
day-to-day
then turns to
stuff.
Alan.
You just
Confiding
focus on your
Anastasia
own
had been
work.
so worried she had run from Duke
If that's what
crying
you
in the
want.
With a warm smile, she suggests he call her daughter Anna. Anastasia, mortified, loudly denies having cried. While Alan processes this
We
news
only
and
get
leaning closer,
70%?
the Duchess playfully presses him for an answer, asking what he thinks
Oh,
of the
right.
idea.
Of
Alan
course.
hesitates, unsure how to
Sandroni is
respond.
the
He
one
turns to
renting this
Anastasia
boat,
and
after
formally
all.
asks if he may call her
Ugh,
his son.
you make me sound like
Blushing
some
and
sort of
flustered,
tyrannical
she agrees,
landlord.
but on the condition
You're
that he only
putting in
does
the
so
work,
when they are alone.
so you
Having
should
settled
get the
matter,
lion's
she
share.
regains her composure
I'm
and
not
calls out to the
stingy
butler,
like
Seabass,
Pantalone.
announcing that it is time
So
to
that means
proceed to the dining hall.
You're giving
He
us the all
dutifully
clear?
acknowledges her command. As they walk,
Sure,
Alan
you
reflects
have
in
my
turn. He
blessing.
decides it is better
Just
to
make
show
sure it
emotion
doesn't get in the
appropriate
way
for
of
his
my
hand age,
research.
rather than maintaining his usual stoic poker face.
The
Now
winner
seated at the formal
Glip
dining table with the entire
Underwater
Ramslet
is
family,
officially
Alan
open
and
for
his mother
business.
listen as Duke Gerhard He
Of
states clearly
course
that he
you
invited them
already
to discuss
thought of
the
a
details
name.
of the recent incident. He elaborates on the outcome of the incident, explaining that its primary condition was an apology for the insult to his family. To that end, it has been decided that the Crown Prince and Amy will formally apologize to Anastasia at the next term's opening ceremony, ensuring the act is witnessed by their peers. Taking a sip from his glass, he then delivers the final, momentous consequence. The engagement between the Crown Prince and his daughter is officially canceled. His wife, Duchess Elizabeth Ramslet, then addressed Alan, noting that her daughter seems quite fond of him. She asked that he continue to be a good friend to Anastasia. The Duke then confirmed the final details of Alan's situation. He announced that Alan would not be punished or expelled from school, a decision that left both Alan and Anastasia stunned with relief. The Duke encouraged Alan to enjoy his school life, and even offered to introduce him to someone for employment after graduation, suggesting he could work for the Ramslet family. Overwhelmed by this news, Alan's mother clasped her hands to her face, tears of gratitude streaming down her cheeks as she thanked the Duke most. As she continued to weep, the family's butler offered her a handkerchief. Duchess Elizabeth smiled kindly, remarking on what a relief it must be, and Katerina could only agree through her tears, thanking them warmly. The Duchess then turned back to Alan with a playful glint in her eye, declaring that she would be in his care next week. Her teasing suggestion that she might be in his arms caused him to stammer in surprise. With the serious discussion concluded, Duke Gerhard cheerfully invited Alan and Katerina to enjoy the meal. The entire Ramslet family sat with them, and the dinner began in the arms. He took a bite, a profound sense of satisfaction washing over him. Alan closed his eyes, thinking to himself that he was truly glad for all the hard work he had put in. After the meal, as Alan and his mother prepared to depart by carriage, they offered their sincere thanks to the Ramslet family. Duke Gerhard assured Alan that he was welcome at their home anytime. Just as they were leaving, Anastasia stepped forward, asking to speak with Alan for a moment. Seeing this, the Duchess suggested she show Katerina around the garden, giving the two young people some privacy. She got straight to the point, her expression determined. Anastasia stated that she wanted to explore the Altmund Labyrinth and intended to formally request him, a C-rank adventurer, to be their guide. She added that Margaret would be coming. She questions him about the Altmund Labyrinth, specifically the Great Orc Labyrinth, asking how deep he intends to go. Alan is stunned that she knows it. He internally debates whether to reveal that he explored it or is still a secret to him. Anastasia, however, quickly pieces it together, her eyes widening as she demands to know if he's already explored. With a casual smile, Alan confirms that he found it deep in the jungle a long time. He elaborates, dismissing the danger by explaining that the final boss was merely an orc king and the labyrinth lacked any traps, which is why he hadn't considered it a significant find. Anastasia listens, her expression a mixture of frustration and disbelief. She concedes that discoverers are not required to report such finds, but is still shocked by his nonchalant attitude. Amy, looking overwhelmed, interjects to ask what he meant by fast labs. He explains it was a method he used to quickly memorize the labyrinth's layout, suggesting that with a minimal level of self-defense, one could likely navigate it. He clarifies that fast labs is an efficient training method for leveling up, involving clearing the entire labyrinth and immediately starting over from the entrance. The thought alone causes Anastasia to break into a sweat, though she has to agree that the method is brutally effective. Noticing her reaction, he asks if something is the matter. Anastasia quickly composes herself, claiming it's nothing, but her gaze lingers on him with a mix of awe and embarrassment. "You are really something," she murmurs, leaving Alan to simply respond with a questioning yes. Amy, seizing the opportunity, eagerly asks if he will guide them, proposing they make plans to set out after the new year begins. Alan readily agrees, confirming that it sounded like a great idea, and so, shortly after the new year, they journey by carriage for a few hours and arrive in the town of Altline, where Margaret resides. They are greeted by a confident woman in adventurer's gear, who informs them that according to the guild, many others have already attempted to conquer the labyrinth. Alan voices his concern that it might have already been cleared, but she reassures him that they still have a chance. Her focus then shifts entirely to Alan. Citing his recent victory against the school's 5 strongest students in a duel, she expresses a keen interest in scouting him for the Altline team. The proposal leaves Alan momentarily speechless. The woman then turns to Anastasia with a warm smile, telling her not to worry, as she has no intention of stealing away her precious knight. A flustered Anastasia turns away, insisting she has no idea what she's talking about. Alan cuts in, his expression serious. He apologizes for raising their expectations about the labyrinth's riches, explaining that he has already collected all of its treasure. As compensation, he offers to give the entire hoard to them. He confirms his identity to the skeptical adventurers accompanying Cecilia. One of them, a man with a prominent mustache, notes that he heard from Margaret that Alan would be their guide, questioning if he's still just a student. Another adventurer, a man with a goatee, finds this hard to believe, recalling that Alan has conquered the Goblin Labyrinth and earned the title of First. A third man asks what his plans are. Alan calmly explains his intention. Before they proceed, he wants to test their skills so they can decide on a proper formation. The mustached man confidently assures Cecilia that they will handle Margaret safely. Cecilia, however, looks on with a skeptical side of it, clearly having her doubts about the man. With the terms set, the party stands before the dark, timber-framed entrance to the labyrinth, and their exploration. Just inside, Alan instructs the party to try fighting the orcs themselves when they appear. He promises to intervene immediately if things become dangerous, and orders Cecilia acknowledges. Cecilia realizing they don't trust Alan. She worries that their distrust will make them ignore his commands, putting them all in danger. Deeper inside the cavern, their first encounter emerges from the shadows, a massive, tusked boar and a club-wielding orc. One of the armored men declares he'll go first, but is abruptly killed. Alan steps forward, halting the party. He announces that he will be the one to go first, prompting a surprised Cecilia to question his actions. He calmly faces the snarling beast, his weapon at the ready. He tells the others it's time to let him show them just how powerful their guide truly is. He calmly produces a strange, metallic device, unlike any weapon they have ever seen. As Cecilia shouts a warning that the monster is approaching, one of her men stares at the object in disbelief, demanding to know what it is. The giant boar roars, charging directly at them. One of the armored men orders him to get back, but he ignores the command, leveling the strange weapon at the beast as Cecilia cries out his name. A deafening crack echoes through the passage as a brilliant flash erupts from the device's tail. The charging boar is struck, his momentum halted instantly before it collapses to the ground in a lifeless heap. The adventurers can only stare, their faces fused with shock. He lowers the weapon, letting out a quiet breath as the immediate threat is neutralized. The display leaves the party utterly bewildered. One of the men stammers in disbelief, while another grabs out, demanding an explanation for what he just witnessed. He calmly explains that the device is a magic tool of his own creation, designed to shoot iron bullets using an application of wind magic. Cecilia, a nervous smile on her face, admits she sees now and says she will be counting on it. One of her men, still sweating from the shock, nervously agrees to leave it to him. Alan simply smiles, stating that he looks forward to working with them and that they should proceed. Cecilia quietly observes that she has never witnessed such a technique before, expressing her relief that he is not their enemy. Alan cheerfully agrees, adding that they should work together to protect Margaret and Anastasia. As the group regains its composure, another monster appears further down. Alan calmly points it out, prompting a surprise Cecilia to declare that she can without hesitation. She charges forward, arm deliver a powerful. She lunged forward, her sword of silver and sliced cleanly through the orc's neck. With the creature dispatched, she glanced back at Alan with a confident smile, asking who he had intended to protect. Her party members watched, stunned by her swiftness. Elsewhere, the prince had laid out his own party strategy. He declared he would take the lead with Anastasia, following closely behind. The knights were assigned, while Amy's role was to protect him directly, ensuring they could all win. The battle concluded with the decisive defeat of the Orc King. Following the victory, one of Cecilia's men wiped sweat from his brow, his expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. He marveled at how easily the Orc King, along with his priests, had been dispatched, admitting that the display made him the threat neutralized. The prince addressed the assembled group, gesturing toward the glowing doorway. He instructed everyone to proceed into that room, explaining it was their way out of the labyrinth. As they prepared to leave, Amy turned to Alan with a grateful smile. She thanked him sincerely, acknowledging that they had depended on his strength far too much during the The knights grumbled in disappointment at the lack of any treasure, calling the orcs stingy. Amy then explained to Alan that he would return to the entrance simply by touching the labyrinth's core. Alan acknowledged her instructions, referencing his fast lapse method. However, Cecilia stepped in, informing Alan that he would be accompanying her instead. She warned him not to get arrogant, prompting a quick apology from the boy. She then declared that she would lead the next lab, with Alan and Anastasia following her, as they continued their training to level up. On a grand stage before the student body, Anastasia raises her hand, her voice ringing out with a formal declaration concerning the Duke of Ramslet. In the audience, Alan watches, his expression frozen in disbelief. Her eyes are narrowed with fierce determination, a stark contrast to her usual demeanor. He, in turn, can only stare back, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. Hours earlier, his day had begun so simply. With winter vacation over, it was the first day of school. He had promised his mother he would be back, and she had wished him well from the top of the stairs. Walking through the capital, Alan had been sorting through the consequences of his actions. He had successfully prevented Anastasia's condemnation and banishment, an event that was supposed to trigger the capital's destruction. In doing so, he had completely shattered the fate prescribed by the game's scenario. He reflected that his knowledge of the future had allowed him to make the first move, and now, that from this point forward, he understood he would have to think and act with extreme care to avoid the worst possible outcome. The political situation was just as precarious. By preventing the civil war, he had, for the time being, staved off an invasion from the neighboring Est Empire. A fragile power balance between the nations was the only thing maintaining peace. He was left to wonder what the new reality would be, now that the original scenario was destroyed. The consequences were already taking shape, with the engagement between Anastasia and the Crown Prince William. The prince's position had become unstable. The Ramslet Duchy, the kingdom's largest granary, had been the foundation of his power, controlling the nation's food supply. Furthermore, the duel had shattered the balance between the Crown Prince's faction and that of the Second Prince. In the ensuing chaos, the southern nobles might even rally behind him. Despite his low ranking, the Duke possessed the right to succeed the throne, making him a dangerous new contender for him. Alan contemplates the kingdom's new, fragile political system, a situation just as unstable as the original scenario he sought to prevent. He finds it troublesome, even wondering if he should have simply eliminated the Crown Prince. His thoughts are interrupted by the sight of Anastasia, who wears a slide. He questions what sort of scheme she's devising, while also suspecting that Amy has not yet abandoned her goal of appearing. He walks through the school grounds, resolute. After coming here, he is determined to achieve a happy ending, no matter the cost, to save his mother and his siblings. As he walks, a cheerful voice calls out his name. The greeting comes from Isabella and Amy, who wish him good morning. Isabella happily informs him that they're in the same class as him and Anastasia for semester. And asks if he has seen class list yet. Upon his confirmation, Isabella waves goodbye, saying she will see him later. Amy adds that she looks forward to being in his care. Sentiment Alan echoes. He smiles to himself and that with those two around, Anastasia will have a better time, perhaps make more friends. His pleasant mood is short-lived, however. He sighs as he overhears other students whispering. The commoner challenge the prince in a duel. Annoyed, he decides to go check the class list first. Finding more than noticing his status as student of the year allowed him to remain in the class. In contrast, Leonardo, who had the lowest scores, he assumes Claude must have not been support. Just as he processes this, Phyllis belongs to the state, who stands before him with commanding presence. Startled, Alan mumbles her. She chides him, telling him to stop calling her. After he apologizes, she complains that her mother is unbearably insistent on meeting him again before asking about his family. She continues, mentioning that her brother would also like to meet him when he returns home. She then asks if Alan's brother is at the school. Alan hesitates before explaining that Claude is currently out of school. He then pivots, asking Anastasia if she has seen the class list. He listened as Anastasia explained the fallout from the duel, revealing that the Kingdom of Westerdale had apparently requested that Leonardo drop out of school. He asked if this was also a result of the duel, and she confirmed it, adding that she'd heard Leonardo was also disowned by his family. Leonardo himself had apparently confirmed this. She elaborated that the Ramslet family had made a formal protest to the Viscount Jukes family. Because Leonardo refused to admit his fault and insisted he was right, the Jukes family could no longer defend him. She confirmed this was the case, acknowledging that while it had been a series of unpleasant events for her, it was an obvious and ultimately positive result for the country. Changing the subject, she reminded him of the opening ceremony and urged him to head to the auditorium with her. They made their way to the auditorium, where a school official announced that a formal apology would be held, directed at the Ramslet family, the Crown Prince, and his companions. The official then called Anastasia Kleinel von Ramslet to the podium, and she turned to Alan, asking him to come with her. She turned to him with a determined gaze, stating that since he fought on her behalf, he had the right to witness this from behind her. He quietly agreed. He agreed and followed her up the steps to the stage, where Karl-Heinz Bartiel, von Citroen, and Marcus von Bain were already waiting. Once they were on stage, she faced the group and asked directly if they would now accept the result. The prince and his companions stood before them, their expressions a mixture of resentment and defeat. Karl-Heinz grit his teeth, acknowledging to himself that the humiliation was Leonardo's own fault. He clenched his fist and began the formal apology, retracting their words against the Ramslet. Beside him, Isabella also quietly offered her own apology. He and his companions stand defeated as Anastasia formally accepts their apology. She issues a stern warning, hoping they will not belittle the Ramslet family so easily again, though she privately questions if a sincere apology is even possible for them. As they begin to walk away, Isabella quietly addresses him as Carlson. He responds with a simple, terse yeah. The prince and his retinue then make their way through the silent, watching crowd of students. Nearby, Alan notices Isabella's simmering rage. Though she claims she doesn't mind, her clenched fist and furious expression betray her true feelings. Alan, meanwhile, is still confused, admitting to himself that he doesn't even know what they were apologizing for. His thoughts are interrupted as Anastasia calls out to him. Alan, wait, she says. He turns, responding with a simple yes. A confident smile spreads across her face as she tells him to wait just a moment. Before he can respond, she turns and strides back onto the stage, facing the entire assembly. Alan watches from the crowd. completely bewildered. Her voice rings out with authority. Alan, she calls. She announces that he, as her representative, defended the honor of the Ramslet family. To recognize his achievements and loyalty, she declares that she will reward him. She continues, making a stunning proclamation. The Duke of Ramslet decided to take Alan and his entire family under their official protection. The students in the audience murmur in shock. The whole weight of her words crashes down on Alan, leaving him utterly stunned and speechless. He is presented with a white handkerchief bearing an ornate crest. Anastasia's voice is quiet as she asks if he'll accept. He accepts it, though his mind races with uncertainty. He wonders if this is some aristocratic custom, a piece of etiquette he is completely unaware. Accepting his command with a sudden, resounding wave of applause from the assembled students. A moment, Amy and Isabella clap with genuine delight, their faces beaming. With the public ceremony concluded, he and Anastasia walk together down the hall, their sunlit corridor, leaving the crowd behind as they proceed. Questioning the need for such a grand declaration, the king himself was already aware of the situation. She clarifies that her announcement was not for the royalty, but a direct warning to the other students. Since his duel, she explains, she has heard unpleasant rumors and wanted to make it clear that anyone who harms him will become an enemy of the Ramslet family. He thanks her for her consideration. Just as he begins to ask about the meaning of the handkerchief, Anastasia looks away, slightly frustrated. Their conversation is cut short by the approaching voices of Amy and Isabella. Isabella rushes up to them, praising Anastasia's great work. She then contorting her face comically, she describes how shocked and pale the other students looked at the declaration. Her attention then lands on the handkerchief in his hand. You got a handkerchief from Anna Simone, didn't you? She asks, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. Can I see it? Confused by their intense interest, he holds it out. Both Isabella and Amy lean close, their faces lighting up as they let out squeals of purity. He watches as Isabella, with a knowing smile, begins to explain the custom surrounding the handkerchief. She details that when a noble lady sews her family crest onto a handkerchief and presents it to her knight, it serves as a public declaration. As the meaning starts to sink in, Amy lets out an excited scream, while Alan can only utter confused. Isabella finishes with a triumphant grin, stating it's a way to declare, he is mine. The realization hits Alan, but a flustered Anastasia quickly interrupts, insisting with a nervous laugh that she was merely thanking her benefactor. Amy simply giggles at her friend's reaction. Her denial causes Alan's thoughts to drift to a conversation he had with her father. The Duke had been very clear. As the daughter of a great house, Anastasia would eventually be married off to royal or another high rank in a political arrangement. As if sensing his thoughts, his expression turns serious. But clarifies that she cannot afford any mistakes. She reframes her gesture as a promise, a pact so that they do not hurt each other. With unwavering resolve, she vows that should anything happen, she will absolutely protect him. Inside a well-appointed room, Alan and Duke Ramslet discuss the situation in the Westerdale Kingdom. Alan wonders about the reason for Prince Claude's exile, which the Duke explains was a minor punishment and an apology for the duel. Alan finds it odd that the prince would so easily accept being separated from Amy, concluding that his love for her must be profound. The Duke remarks grimly that love is blind, as Claude even volunteered to act as a representative. The Duke speculates on a deeper motive, suggesting the prince likely anticipates that Amy will eventually be forced to leave the country due to the impending devastation of the nation. He continues this line of thought, foreseeing a civil uprising following a battle for succession, which would inevitably lead to war. He elaborates on the geopolitical situation, questioning whether Westerdale, a friendly nation dependent on them for food and resources, would side with them or with the Estonian Empire. He concludes it's likely Estonia will take advantage of the internal chaos to launch an attack. Alan considers this, then posits a grim alternative. Rather than saving the country, it might be wiser for Westerdale to simply share the territory with Estonia after an invasion. Hearing this sharp analysis, the Duke interrupts Alan, a new thought striking him. He wonders aloud if Prince Claude could already be in contact with Estonia. He sighs, admitting that he thinks it's possible. The Duke recalls the original scenario from the game he knows. Amy and her friends would flee the country after invasion by Estonia, only to be saved by Westerdale, who would then launch a counterattack. However, he dismisses this as highly unlikely now, explaining that he has destroyed that scenario. By using Amy's weakened descent to persuade the kingdom, he has removed any political reason for Westerdale. His bastard daughter, the skin of him represents the ship to top. Having understood the situation, he now asks about the south, mentioning that the eldest son, Conrad, has returned to the estate. Alan is surprised by this news. The Duke explains that the Ramslet territory is in the southeast, near the border with the Kingdom of South, which is allied with Estonia. He adds that they have urgently called back their heir, prompting Alan to ask if South is also preparing to make a move. He processes the grim strategic map, as Duke Ramslet observes that if the northern powers make a move, their kingdom will be surrounded on all sides. Alan concludes that this is a far more complicated situation than the one they faced before the destruction. The Duke reassures him that the military cannot act suddenly, predicting they will wait until the winter wheat harvest. He asks Alan if he's enjoying this week. Alan confirms that this is telling more and more personal. The Duke asks Alan if he's helping, not as with a hand to his chest, Alan agrees, stating he would be happy to help both the Duke and Anastasia, just as the Duke predicted. The second year of Academy inside the academy, life around the changed a little bit aside from darkness. However, she and Jamie are no longer in conflict. He observes the new political climate. The second prince's faction now blatantly ignores the crown prince's group. Alan realizes the power struggle in the royal palace has been brought to the school as well. Amidst this tension, Anastasia approaches him and asks if he has time, suggesting they talk while walking. She brings up the summer vacation's independent research project, revealing her theme is the role of adventurers in the country. Her topic leads to a direct request. She asks if he will introduce her to the Adventurers Guild. Alan hesitates, and Anastasia playfully asks if she's unworthy of introduction, before admitting with a slight blush that she was just kidding. As they continue, Anastasia explains to him that Isabella and Margaret will be conducting the adventure research program. The other two girls smile. He finds himself watching her, thinking that she smiles more often, likely because of a friendship with Isabella. Anastasia catches him staring and asks her, prompting him to question. She expresses her gratitude, asking Alan to inform the guild that she is working diligently to break her engagement. Sometime during the summer vacation, Anastasia meets Alan in a commoner's disguise. Adjusting her bonnet, she questions if the outfit is truly necessary, mentioning that the butler, Sebastian, arranged it for her. Alan observes that she is sneaking out once again. He explains that her situation has changed since the duel and the broken engagement. With the Ramslet family having not yet declared support for either the Crown Prince or the Second Prince, it is better for her to avoid standing out. Though she dislikes sneaking around, she seems to understand, and Alan adds that the disguise suits her. Their walk is interrupted when they come across a scene in an alley. A group of noble students, led by Leonardo, are gathered around a small, hooded figure. Leonardo spots Alan and calls out to him. Oscar, Marcus, Amy, and another group are addressing the hooded figure. Leonardo declares that as the top students of their grade, they will not abandon someone in trouble. He demands the figure guide them to a village, supposedly being attacked by monsters, so they can help. The hooded figure quietly denies the existence of any monsters. She insists she is not lying, and questioning if she dares lie to the next king. His companions murmur in confusion, wondering if they have the right person. From a distance, Anastasia watches the tense scene unfold. The confrontation is cut short by the sudden arrival of the elven princess, Sherry. Her face is a mask of fury as she confronts the hooded girl, accusing her of trying to prevent her from receiving a blessing. She hoists the small girl into the air by her cloak. Alan stares in disbelief, wondering what she could possibly mean by a blessing, as the other students cry out in alarm. With a sharp cry, Sherry delivers a powerful kick, sending the hooded girl flying. Alan shouts in shock, recognizing the attacker's voice as Cheryl Loris. The hooded girl confirms her identity as she is struck. She lands and immediately points a trembling finger at Leonardo and his friends. Through tears, she accuses them of threatening her and trying to steal her money, leaving the noble students completely stunned. As the chaos from her accusations settled, Prince Karl-Heinz explained the situation to Leonardo. He revealed they were following a prophecy Amy had received, one that foretold someone being attacked by a monster and asking for help. The prince identified the hooded girl as the subject of this prophecy. Watching from nearby, Alan understood that saving the elf village was a mandatory event tied to this blessing. The elven princess, Sherry, sharply interjected, demanding to know if the girl was truly being attacked by a monster, declaring that she absolutely was not. Her eyes narrowed as she accused the hooded girl of planning to rob someone in the city and questioned her true intentions. Leonardo, taken aback, urged Sherry to stop pestering her, but the hooded girl merely winced under the princess's intense scrutiny. Frustrated with the entire affair, Prince Karl-Heinz clicked his tongue. He announced it was no use and turned to leave, surprising both Sherry and Leonardo with his abrupt departure. As his group walked away, the hooded girl defiantly stuck her tongue out at them. Leonardo caught the gesture and glared back, silently vowing that he would not forget this slight. The wind from Sherry's earlier display of power had yet to cease. Anastasia, looking around in confusion, turned to Alan and asked who that girl was. Before he could respond, the hooded girl herself stepped forward, her gaze fixed on him. "That's my line," she stated, asking Alan who he thought she was. The argument reignited instantly. Sherry took offense at being called a little girl by someone physically smaller than her. The hooded girl shot back that Sherry was younger and pleaded for her to stop. Unmoved, Sherry insisted she was bigger and demanded the insolent girl state her name. Ignoring the princess, the hooded girl grabbed Alan, insisting he was on her side and that they needed to hurry to in the hallway of a nearby building. Jared knelt by a door, while a bald, bearded adventurer stood in reach. As Alan entered, Jared wondered aloud. Finding the situation, he pressed his ear against the door, listening in. He mused that Alan couldn't just sit in the corner, having entered the room during what sounded like a lover's quarrel between two women. His companion leaned down, catching him in the act. The bald adventurer remarked on Jared's bad taste for eavesdropping before calling out loudly. To explain this out, he suggests the elven princess can finally remember. With a sigh of relief, she does, revealing her long, pointed ears and complaining that keeping them folded would give her a strange look. Anastasia then formally introduces her to an unseen party as Cheryl Laura, the daughter of the Queen of Elves. Following this, Anastasia turns to the princess and introduces herself with a slight bow as Anastasia, daughter of the Duke of Ramsland. She offers a sincere apology for her previous words, blushing slightly. Cheryl simply observes her expression as Anastasia stands flustered by her own admission Alan steps into ease. He explains to her that in the elven world, there are no differences in status or manners between commoners and nobles, rendering such formalities unnecessary. His words seem to work, as Cheryl's focus shifts entirely back to him. Her eyes light up with excitement as she invites Alan to their summer festival. She clarifies that she came to the village because she is an adventurer and thought it would be acceptable to make the request through the gift. Alan is stunned that she would take such a risk for a simple invitation. Cheryl then leans in, a mischievous glint in her eye, and reveals her true motive. She wants to get a ride on his flying ship on her way back. The unexpected request leaves Alan utterly speechless, his eyes wide. He recovered. Anastasia stepped forward. She declares that Alan has a lot of experience, specifically about the elven village. Unseen by him, two adventurers were eavesdropping on Alan, having been swiftly neutralized. Inside a room, Anastasia confronts him, demanding to know as Alan stares, unable to form a response. The elven princess, Cheryl Laura, reclines casually. Cheryl Laura explaining that Alan is the big fashion of the village. Anastasia, still suspicious, presses further, asking what it is. Enthusiastic elaborates, revealing that Alan protected the village from the evil spirits. She declares him to be the divine child of the wind god, descended from the sky. Anastasia is stunned into silence by this revelation, while Cheryl Laura chuckles, surprised she didn't already know. Anastasia, flustered, tells Cheryl Laura that her teasing has gone far enough, wondering if the elf is using some power to make Alan obey her. Cheryl Laura dismisses the notion and changes the subject, formally inviting Alan to her village's summer festival. Alan agrees that he can attend the festival, but a worried expression crosses his face as a practical concern arises. He asks Cheryl Laura how she managed to enter the town in the first place. She answers with blunt simplicity, stating that she just walked in through the main gate, as if it were the most obvious thing. Alan immediately points out the danger of her casual approach. He explains that if she were to be captured, the very existence of the hidden elven village would be revealed to the world. The princess appears genuinely confused, asking if humans truly desire to capture elves so badly. Anastasia interjects, clarifying that while some might, that isn't the core of the problem. Alan explains that they were lucky this time, as the town wasn't on high alert. If she were to act suspiciously, people would inevitably investigate her actions. As Cheryl Laura sighs in relief, Alan's attention shifts, and he wonders aloud if it's safe for Anastasia to accompany them. He quickly formulates a plan. They leave from the Noble's Gate with Anastasia. He reasons their departure won't arouse any suspicion at all. He explained that his plan was the best way to get out of town safely. But Anastasia vehemently refused, declaring there was no way she would allow another human into the Elven village. Hearing this, the Elven princess, Cheryl Laura, pondered for a moment before suggesting a new approach. They could pretend that Anastasia was Alan's fiancée. The idea left Anastasia utterly speechless. Anastasia flushed at the word fiancé. Alan reasoned that if she were related to him, she might be permitted to enter the village, and asked if she was okay with the idea. Before she could properly answer, Cheryl celebrated, declaring the problem solved and that they should prepare for the festival. Seizing the opportunity to research the elves, Anastasia agreed, telling Alan not to worry. She then turned to leave, announcing that she had to hurry and get ready, adding that she would need to get permission to stay overnight. Alan could only watch her go, remarking on what a strange girl she was. An hour later, the group stood before a large, sleek glider. Anastasia stared in wonder, asking if it was Alan's ship. Nearby, Alan adjusted some gear to Cheryl, telling her to hold still while the princess beamed with pride. She asked if the craft flew like a bird. Cheryl, now sporting the pilot's cap and goggles, confidently assured her it did, boasting that she would soon be amazed by the power of the wind god's divine child. The princess then asked Alan where she was supposed to sit. He simply pointed, telling Anastasia where her seat was. Cheryl adjusted her goggles, a look of confusion on her face. Her question was answered moments later as she found herself in the straps securely. She yelled out to Alan, demanding to know why she was the only one positioned there, assuming the others would be sitting up front. He leaned over and whispered to Anastasia, explaining that it was a special seat with a spectacular view. He urged her to keep it a secret, claiming Anasama would be upset if she found out. At first, however, Cheryl laughed heartily. She declared that Alan was smart and that this was exactly what she expected of him. Anastasia, confused by the exchange, asked what she had said, but Alan simply told her not to worry about it. As Cheryl is secured, Anastasia asks Alan where she should sit. He explains that this is the only way to distribute the weight, a method he confirmed while transporting, or he instructs her to hold on tight. She settles in behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, and asks if he's all right, concerned that their combined weight might be too much. He reassures her that it's fine. With everyone in place, Alan announces their departure. The glider surges forward and lifts off the ground, rapidly gaining altitude as it soars into the sky. As they climb, Anastasia's eyes widen with wonder. She exclaims that it's amazing and incredibly fast, marveling that they are truly flying. She turns to Alan, telling him his invention is awesome. She looks down at the receding landscape, pointing out the royal capital and the castle, remarking on how small they appear from such a height. Alan informs her that it's a 4-hour flight to the Elven village and that they should arrive at sunset. He apologizes for the cramped conditions, asking her to bear with him. Despite her excitement, the close proximity causes a faint blush to cross her face as she quietly acknowledges to herself how cramped it is. Her gaze softens as she looks at the boy piloting them so skillfully. She calls his name, telling him he is truly amazing as the glider soars over a vast mountain range. Meanwhile, in the Elven village, a group of elves, including the queen, spots the approaching aircraft. A guard identifies Alan and confirms that Cheryl Laura is with him and safe. However, another elf points out with alarm that there is a third person on board, a human. The glider lands smoothly, and the villagers gather around, murmuring in surprise at the sight of another human. As Anastasia dismounts, a guard thanks her. From her position on the wing, Cheryl impatiently tells Alan to let her off first, complaining that Anastasia is in her way. The other elves excitedly ask Alan about the flight. Later, the group stands before the Elven Queen. She addresses Alan, apologizing if her daughter caused him too much trouble. He assures her it was fun. The queen's gaze then settles on Anastasia, and she asks who this girl is. Alan confirms to Anastasia that this isn't
Yeah.
the outcome she had feared. As Anastasia began to sweat, the queen revealed she knew from Sherry that Anastasia could have simply helped them escape and return to town, but had chosen not to. Her interrogation culminated in a single, knowing question. Why? Knowing everything, why had Anastasia still come? The question stunned Anastasia into silence. Her mind filled with images of Alan. She could not speak the truth. Her feelings were kneeling before the Elven Queen. Anastasia's thoughts were consumed by one person. The memory of his smile brings a fresh wave of turmoil. The Elven Queen addresses her, acknowledging the social chasm that separates them. Alan, a commoner, and Anastasia, a noble. She points out that this is a constraint and offers a solution. For Anastasia, she continues, explaining that the elves also wish for their benefactor, Alan, to live happily. If Anastasia's love cannot flourish in her own world, the Queen suggests perhaps it would be better to cast aside. Anastasia as a noble who has been sustained by her, she insists that she cannot abandon her. The Queen offers her. She asks why Anastasia doesn't she could live for her people. Watches her, a gentle smile on her face, and observes that Anastasia seems rather sensitive and offers some gentle counsel, suggesting that perhaps Anastasia should relax and be more honest with herself. The words leave Anastasia to quietly ponder. A short while later, as she steps out onto a veranda, a familiar voice calls to her. It's Alan, with Lula on his shoulders and Lou floating nearby. He asks if she has finished her conversation with the Queen. Startled, he notices her strange reaction and asks what's the matter. Flustered, Anastasia averts her gaze and dismisses it as nothing, muttering that she thought he had already gone to his room. She kneels formally as Alan introduces her to the Elven Queen, Mira Laura, the spirit of light, Lo. Anastasia offers a polite greeting, honored to meet them. But Alan quickly realizes that she cannot see the spirit floating beside him. He tries to cover for this, casually mentioning that the spirit is floating around. Unable to perceive Lo, Anastasia can only express her confusion at what she considers a rather rough introduction. Despite her inability to see her, Anastasia formally introduces herself as Anastasia Kleinel von Ramsled, expressing her pleasure at meeting the spirit of light. As she speaks, Lo and other small spirits flutter around her, creating an eerie presence that Alan feels he must put a stop to. His eyes widen in realization. He turns to her and asks if she is, by any chance, the daughter of Duke Gerhard and Elizabeth. Before Anastasia can answer, the spirit of light chimes in, confirming that she knows Anastasia because she taught magic to her mother when she was just a little girl. Lo fondly recalls that Elizabeth was an angel back then, before calling Alan a pervert. Anastasia, unable to hear the spirit's voice, is startled by the sudden silence. The moment is broken when a young elf, Mira Laura, reaches her arms out, making it clear she wants Alan to hug her. A flustered Anastasia turns to him, asking what has happened. He corrects the child's assumption, telling Anastasia that Mira wants her to hold her. Before she can fully process the request, Alan places the young princess into her arms. Mira seems to have quickly grown attached to Anastasia, who holds her awkwardly. Lo observes that Anastasia must not be a bad person, and that it's a beautiful sight, save for her tense expression. The spirit then begins to tease them, musing about the forbidden love between commoner and noble, prompting a sharp rebuke. They remain silent as Lo continues to reason, pointing out that since they are in the hidden village of elves, no one from the human world will ever find out. Anastasia continues to hold the child, her arm growing tired. The spirit giggles to herself, remarking that surprisingly, Alan also seems to enjoy playing with fire, a clear jab at his supposed weakness. Lying awake in the elven village, Alan tosses in bed, a single thought echoing in his mind. No matter what happens, he is stuck here. While he frets, Anastasia sits alone on a veranda under the full moon, contemplating her own words and wondering if it's time to be honest with herself. Unaware of her introspection, Alan mutters in his room, still annoyed by the spirit of light's teasing, calling her a pervert. The next day, the village is alive. Elves in traditional attire mill wearing crowned flowers, cheerfully beckons others to join us. The elven man asking if he's attending the festival. At that moment, another elf places a similar crown on Anastasia's head, remarking on her beauty as she looks on his face. Turns to the guard, still confused, and asks again at the festival. The guard patiently repeats the custom. Before Alan can process this, Elven man ushers him. Both in the chamber. Explanation leaves Alan utterly. The man runs away with the woman he loves. Protect her from life. The elves explain that if he protects her tiara until the end, they will be blessed by the spirits. They wish him luck. Grapple. Anastasia emerges, dressed in a traditional Elven still. She tells Alan she heard the details of the accident, remarking that the elves are either very tough or very easy. She clarifies that the elves are there, doing something, asks if he would prefer to decline. Despite his earlier confusion, Alan looks at her and makes a decision. Since they're already there, he suggests they should join. Anastasia, blushing slightly, seems to agree. Having agreed, they walk through the bustling festival grounds. Alan mentions his interest in elven culture as a reason for participating. The elven guard thanks him and leads them to a designated waiting area. In the waiting area, they're surrounded by elven couples openly embracing and kissing. The public displays of affection are overwhelming. Anastasia leans toward Alan, suggesting they might be better off refraining from the event after all. He quickly agrees, both of them looking thoroughly flustered. He found himself in the middle of a lively festival, with elves playing flutes and drums. The male elf guard who had been guiding them urged Alan and everyone else to join the circle for a dance. Confused, Anastasia, now wearing flower tiara, asked what was going on. Alan admitted he didn't know, but decided it was best to follow them for now. As they moved, the guard explained their task. For now, they just needed to run away and ensure the tiara didn't get dirty. Alan questioned what would happen if they refused, but the guard simply smiled. With a sigh of resignation, Alan agreed to participate. The guard wished them good luck, and in an instant, he and the other elves were enveloped in a magical portal. Alan and Anastasia watched in shock, realizing their pursuers were using acceleration magic with their speed enhanced. The elves began their pursuit, armed with what appeared to be soft, throwable fruit. The objective was now clear. They had the ability to protect the tiara. Alan grabbed Anastasia's hand, urging her to flee. He was immediately struck in the face by one of the projectiles. As Anastasia cried out his name in concern, he wiped the pulp from his cheek, assuring her that it was soft and didn't hurt. His priority remained her tiara. As they continued to run, Anastasia cried out with her leg of fear. With their pursuers closing in, Alan grimaced, apologized for what he was about to do, and then unleashed a thick smoke screen to cover himself. In the cloud of smoke, he swept the surprised Anastasia into his arms, declaring that they needed to keep her. He carried her away from the chaos, finally finding a quiet corner to catch his breath. Flustered by the sudden intimacy, she asked him to please put her down. He immediately apologized for his forwardness. Once on her feet, Anastasia checked her flower crown, relieved to find it safe. She then turned to Alan and quietly asked if she had been hurt. He earnestly replied that it was fine and he could carry her for hours. Her initial surprise gave way to laughter as she questioned if he truly intended to do so. She asked Alan if she was heavy, a blush on cheeks. Her question is nearly drowned out by the fawning of nearby fairy spirits who swarm around her, calling her a wonderful angel and showering her with affection. Alan, sweating from the exertion, realized that he not only the spirits but so have been elven pursuit. He grabs her hand, urging her to stop as one of the guards points her out, pulls her along, and without breaking her, unleashes a blast of wind magic behind her from the stage. The spheres of air hurtle, but Alan knows it's not enough. He grits his teeth, realizing they are outnumbered and must find a way. Their pursuers are returned. The lead guard smirks, remarking on the impressive display. He acknowledges his skill, bows and more moment than so easy. A volley of blood splatters across them, and Alan uses the stage attack against them, his face a mask of pain. She looks up at him, her voice is whispering as she says, surrounded by elven observers. Alan holds his hand. The male elf guard emerges with a sinister smile, holding a small, dark bowl. He remarks what shame it is, declaring it's time to finish things. Anastasia, her face pressed against Alan's chest, calls out his name as the guard lunges. Alan reacts instantly, shoving Anastasia behind him. He shouts an apology to her, positioning himself as a shield against the imminent attack. His resolve hardened. Alan realizes he must protect her until time runs out. He channels his power, commanding his mana to take the form of ice. With a shout, he unleashes an ice spear, which flies true and impales the attacking elf through the chest. Anastasia grabs his arm, her eyes wide with shock and concern. She demands to know what he meant by holding out, crying that there's no point if he gets hurt in the process. Alan looks back at her, his own face a mask of distress. Suddenly, the clear ring of a bell echoes through the area. The Elven Queen appears before them, with a calm smile on her face. She announces that the bell signals the end, congratulating both Alan and Anastasia on a job well done. Alan, splattered with blood, turns to speak to Anastasia, but he is cut short by the Queen's presence. At that moment, the Elven Princess, Sherry, rushes forward, telling her mother to stop. The Queen calmly replies that it's over. Sherry apologizes, explaining that she thought there was a chance and decided to take it, much to the surprise of the other elves. She then turns to the two humans, congratulating Alan and the little girl on their great work. Flustered, Alan can only manage a quiet word of thanks. Later, the group stands assembled in a courtyard. The tension has dissipated, replaced by a formal but peaceful atmosphere as they face the Elven Queen. The Elven Queen explains that their perception of time is different, as expected of a long-lived species. The male elf guard, now perfectly fine, jokes that they will do their best again 10 years later, revealing the entire ordeal was a test. The queen then calls for the two pairs who protected the tiara to come forward, instructing Alan and others to proceed. She watches as the surrounding elves, spurred on by a festival drum, begin to chant, urging Alan and Anastasia closer. Caught completely off guard, the pair stare in flustered shock as the crowd demands they kiss. The elven queen herself encourages them, shouting for them to hurry up. He looks at Anastasia, stammering her name in disbelief. She, blushing and unable to meet his gaze, insists that it can't be helped and they should just pretend to go along with it. Alan confirms that she doesn't really have to, but Anastasia late into the night. It was suggested that they both take the opportunity to wash up beforehand. Following the advice, Alan found himself soaking in a tranquil, stone-lined hot spring, letting out a sigh of relief as the warm water soothed him. He relaxed, recalling that he had forgotten about the hot spring here. His thoughts drifted to the festival itself. He had learned it wasn't for weddings, as elves don't have that concept. Instead, it was a ceremony for choosing a partner to have children. He mused that if Anastasia had known that beforehand, she likely wouldn't have participated. His contemplation was shattered when Anastasia entered the same spring. He stared in shock, crying out her name as he realized it was a mixed bag. Flustered, he immediately apologized and tried to leave. He began to stammer her name, but she told him to wait, assuring him it was fine. With a stern blush, she commanded him not to look her way, and he quickly agreed. An awkward silence fell between them as they sat apart in the steamy water. Both looking away. She broke the silence, remarking that the elves hadn't explained the bathing situation very well. Alan could only manage a flustered look the night sky. She admitted that she liked this village. She agreed, observing how happy the elves and spirits were. Anastasia's thoughts turned to their society, where everyone was equal. There were no royals or nobles squeezing taxes from the people to fund unnecessary luxuries. She wondered why humans could achieve the same, questioning the very purpose of a kingdom. Alan addressed her formally, but she turned to him, her cheeks flushed, and insisted to call her simply on. Her face flushed. She asks if her noble status from the human world truly matters here in the Elven village. She presses the point, asking if she can simply be Anastasia here. Alan begins to agree, addressing her as Anastasia, but she's Anastasia. Then he is just Alan. She looks him in the eye and asks if he will agree to be just Alan, not the quiet of the steamy spring. They close the distance between them, sharing a deep and passionate kiss. On a nearby rooftop, under the starry night sky, the spirit of light, Lou, watches the scene unfold with a gentle, knowing smile. Later, as they lie together, Anastasia calls his name. She recalls a memory from her childhood, seeing a strange bird fly. She asks if that was him, realizing with dawning certainty that they had met long before this. He quietly confirms her suspicion. The next morning, Alan sleeps soundly in his bed, bathed in the soft light of dawn. Lying beside him, Anastasia is already awake, her gaze fixed upon his sleeping face. His eyes flutter open, but he is startled to find her there. She greets him, playfully calling him a sleeping, though she admits she just woke up. He manages a flustered good morning. As Anastasia begins to get out of bed, Alan averts his gaze, flustered by the memory of the previous night. She tells him it's his fault and that they need to prepare to go home. She stumbles slightly, causing him to cry out her formal name. She turns back, gently reminding him that he is to call her on. He corrects himself, and she then informs him that before they return to the royal capital, there is a place she wants to show him. She led him to a serene lake on the village outskirts, remarking on its presence. Alan simply agreed, his gaze following hers across the water, where countless small lights danced on the surface. She pointed them out with excitement, exclaiming at the sheer number of spirits. Sensing there was more on her mind, he gently asked what was wrong. He began to stammer an apology about the previous day, but she quickly cut him off, her face flushing as she insisted he stop. Confused by her reaction, he asked what she meant. His expression hardened with resolve. He declared that while he didn't know when it would happen, he would one day make certain that her father, the Duke, would acknowledge it. He continued his vow, promising to achieve something noteworthy so he could comfort her, and that he would always protect her. Anastasia listened, her gaze softening at her words. He explained that because of this, even if it wasn't in the proper order, he had to act. He then presented a simple ring, causing her eyes to widen in shock. Standing before her by the shimmering lake, he held the ring out and formally asked for her hand. Tears of joy welled in her eyes, her face breaking into a radiant smile as she accepted his proposal without hesitation. They embraced on the shore, the spirits of the lake swirling around them in celebration. The ring now rested on her finger, a symbol of their shared promise. Later that same day, as they prepared to depart, Anastasia offered her sincere thanks to the Elven Queen. The Queen smiled knowingly, advising her to always be honest with herself. She acknowledges that it's a shame to leave, but they must return to the royal capital. their respective statuses demand their return to the capital leads them directly to an audience with Duke Gerhard Ramsler. His fist is clenched in silent anger as he addresses the boy directly, demanding to know if Alan understands why he was called. With a tense expression, Alan confirms that it is. As winged, bat-like creatures descend upon him, Alan shouts a warning to Anastasia. She responds instantly, unleashing a blast of magic that vaporizes one of the others. With the immediate threat neutralized, she calmly informs Alan that it's done, standing over the fallen creatures. He praises her work and suggests they take a short break. Anastasia, however, states that she isn't tired. He insists, reminding her that they are about to face the boss and that it would be better to rest. He offers her some water, which she quietly accepts as a word of thanks. She takes a drink from the water skin, a faint blush on her cheeks as she lets out a sigh. As she does, the simple ring on her left ring finger is clearly visible while Alan watches. The scene shifts to 4 days prior. Alan sits opposite Duke Gerhard Ramsler, who fixes him with an intense, angry stare. The Duke demands to know what the ring is and why his daughter is wearing it on her left ring finger. Alan calmly admits that he gave the ring to Anastasia. The Duke erupts in fury, shouting that Alan is a fool. He reminds the boy of the favor he did by protecting him from the royal family after the duel, warning him to stay away from his daughter. Alan, however, had anticipated his reaction and seals his bet the Duke now settled. He slams his fist on the table, roaring for Alan to shut up. He questions if Alan would have preferred Anastasia to suffer a humiliating defeat, tarnishing the family's honor. He declares it utterly unacceptable for the daughter of Duke Ramslet, a noble, to wear a ring given by a commoner. Cutting through the Duke's rage, Alan states plainly that
I
the
like to
ring
drink on
is not
occasion.
The Duke
Any and every
pauses,
occasion.
taken aback by the message. The item is revealed to be a
Good
substitution.
one.
It is a magical artifact with a single, powerful purpose. If the wearer is about to be killed, the ring will take their place, saving their life. Back in the present, Anastasia gazes at the ring on her finger, now understanding its true nature. She murmurs about what an incredible gift it is, recognizing it as a legendary magic tool coveted by royals and nobles fearing assassination. The item is so valuable, it could earn a title if presented to the king. Alan simply smiles and agrees. Inside the dungeon, Anastasia gazes at the ring on her finger, wondering if she should remove it for safekeeping. Alan gently reminds her that doing so would defeat its purpose. Understanding, she accepts his reasoning. The memory shifts to a past conversation with Duke Ramslet. The Duke questions Alan, asking if he truly obtained his offering from the treacherous Wind Mountain dungeon, a feat never officially reported. Alan confirms he did, because in the truth he knew the Duke would require the magic
Huh? Why does Paimon feel like there's an extra pool here all of a sudden? What does that sign say? Danger! Keep away! Oh, what does that mean?
It means exactly what it says.
Ah! Cendrone! You made Paimon jump! Did you put this sign here?
Yes, with the intention of keeping any curious cats well away.
What's so special about this pool?
It's full of piranhas. Oh, just kidding. Don't tell me you actually believed that. I learned that a few fish in the aquarium are highly territorial and can get rather aggressive. So, I moved them here.
Don't scare Paimon like that! So, this place is like a special quarantine zone for aggro fishies?
Exactly. The water in this pool is much deeper and there's a lot more space. It helps calm down the more territorial fish. I also asked Sijuin at the Fortress of Meropede for some special bait to help mellow them out a bit.
Oh, wow! So, you really do care about the fishies' well-being?
I don't think anyone wants to see the aquarium turn into a bloodbath.
That's for sure. Anyway, why don't you leave this to us?
If you insist. When the fish in the pool feel comfortable enough to swim to the surface, it means they're on the mend.
So, once they're all relaxed and happy, we can put them back in the aquarium?
Where you put them is up to you. All I'm responsible for is scooping up the unruly ones and moving them here in the first place.
Understood! But that sign is way too scary. Maybe we can change it for something a little less... terrifying?
If you want. They're your fish, so I'll leave it up to you.
Thank you for all your hard work, Traveler and Paimon. I have a pretty good understanding of our patient's condition now, so I've mixed them up some special melazine medicine. Adding these herbs to the water tank should help calm them down. So, you're basically turning the whole tank into a giant health spa? Huh! There really is a plan that only you could pull off, Siegeween. You're spot on. I'll need to invite a whole variety of different fish here for physical examinations before I can determine exactly what's wrong. I'll put together a list of patients to check based on the characteristics I need. I'd appreciate it if you could keep a close eye out for any fish that meet the criteria.
Ha!